everyone, welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager of the Pacific Beach Library, and thank you for joining me today for day 14 of our read-along together of Dracula by Bram Stoker. Today, I realized that I forgot to put my water into my tea, so it's just starting to steep. So we're going to talk a little bit about other things first while the tea steeps. In fact, actually, I'm going to start with something totally not related to our read-aloud at all, but it's baseball postseason, and I really like baseball, so I'm just going to say, if anyone else is wearing your Padres shirt in support of our baseball players, let me know. I'd love to hear things. I'm just going to show this off because I'm super proud. This is a shirt that I was actually given by a friend of mine who got this shirt back in 1984. It says for the very first time the Padres went to the World Series. So, I've had this shirt for a long time. She's had it even longer, and so have to wear it again this time for Padres during the postseason. Let's hope they win tonight. If not, still an awesome season. So, let's talk a little bit about yesterday's chapter in the Yesterday we read chapter 13. And in that one, it was preceded by Lucy Westenra dying at the end of chapter 12. But with Dr. Van Helsing saying to Dr. Stewart that it was not the end. And what's interesting about chapter 13 is that basically starts out with them observing that because she is. Okay, let's see. So there's Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager of the Pacific Beach Library, and thank you for joining me today for day 14 of our read-along together of Dracula by Bram Stoker. Today, I realized that I forgot to put my water into my tea, so it's just starting to steep. So we're going to talk a little bit about other things first while the tea steeps. In fact, actually, I'm going to start with something totally not related to our read-aloud at all, but it's baseball postseason, and I really like baseball, so I'm just going to say, if anyone else is wearing your Padres shirt in support of our baseball players, let me know. I'd love to see your thing. I'm just going to show this off because I'm super proud. This is a shirt that I was actually given by a friend of mine who got this shirt back in 1984 because it says it's for the very first time the Padres went to the World Series. So, I've had this shirt for a long time. She's had it even longer, and so happy to wear it again with pride as our Padres are in the postseason. They have lost the first two games, and it's a best-of-5 series, so let's hope they win tonight. If not, still an awesome season, and still something to be celebrated. So, let's talk a little bit about yesterday's chapter in Dracula. Let's see, yesterday we read chapter 13, and in that one, it was preceded by Lucy Westenra dying at the end of chapter 12. But, with Dr. Van Helsing saying to Dr. Seward that it was not the end, but indeed just the beginning. And what's interesting about chapter 13 is that basically it starts out with them observing that her corpse looks so beautiful, and in fact she looks more healthy and more beautiful than she did when she was alive. Almost like she's the undead, because she is. Okay, let's see. So there's just a few interesting things that happen here. Dr. Van Helsing tells Dr. Seward that he would like to conduct not an autopsy on Lucy, but to remove her head and her heart, basically after the viewing has occurred, but before she's buried. And Dr. Seward is just appalled that Dr. Van Helsing would like to mutilate her body in this way. And again, it's because Dr. Van Helsing is not telling Dr. Seward about his suspicion that Lucy's a vampire, and that this is the way to stop her body from not being able to rest and from, living as an undead corpse, as a vampire. And so, Dr. Van Helsing is like, well, maybe there's something we can do instead of that. Instead of doing that, let's get her ready. Let's prepare her for her body in a very particular way. And the way he does it is he covers her body with the flowers that include some more of the garlic blossoms. And he lays a crucifix across her mouth. And I guess the idea is that as her spirit is leaving her body in that first night in which she is dead, that if she cannot be vampiric in some way because of the crucifix stopping her, that maybe she will not become an actual vampire. However, what happens is that evening one of the maids goes in and tries to steal the crucifix. Because the crucifix was not on Lucy Westenra on that first night, the assumption is that she will indeed become a vampire. Interesting stuff happens. Then, also, they talk about how Mrs. Westenra, Lucy's mother, had passed away right before Lucy. She had actually left in her will all of her money to Arthur Holmwood, who is now Lord. Forgive me, I keep messing up his name. I think I'm saying it now as Godalming. It's spelled Godalming. Godalming. I'm honestly not sure which is the proper pronunciation. We're just going to keep calling him Arthur. That works easier. And so, but he has now inherited his father's estate because his father just died. He's also inherited the wealth from the Westenra family because Mrs. Westenra had willed it all to her future son-in-law rather than to her daughter. And so it's interesting too because when they actually have the service, Mr. Arthur ends up saying something about how he feels like he and Lucy were indeed wed, even though they didn't actually go through the ceremony. And in fact, because he gave her a blood transfusion and his blood helped to revive her and was circulating through her body, he felt like, they were indeed one. And so, it was like they were already married thanks to that transfusion. At which point, later on, Dr. Van Helsing bites his tongue and tries not to laugh in Arthur's face, which he later does in the carriage with Dr. Seward, as he explains, well, if that's the case, not only, Lucy's like she's married 4 men then, because she's taken Arthur's blood, Dr. Van Helsing's blood, Dr. Seward's blood, and Quincy Morris's blood. And so, he makes fun of that. You gotta find the fun sometimes. But Dr. Van Helsing also does get permission from Arthur Holmwood to keep Lucy's papers, including her diary and her letters, so he can try to figure out what was going on, what led to her condition. Meanwhile, there's also interspersed in this some entries from Mina Harker. Mina talks about how when she and she and her husband Jonathan are walking through London following the service of Mr. Hawkins, that they see a man, they see Count Dracula. And Dracula looks a little bit different because, again, now that he's had more blood, the white that was in his beard has turned back to black, that he's looking more and more young and restored. And Jonathan has basically a panic attack. And then eventually he passes out and he falls asleep. When he wakes up, he remembers very little of what happened and he's cheerful again. And Mina realizes that whatever trauma he suffered in Transylvania, that it's somehow related to this man, or at least he believes it is. And that in order to understand him and help him, she needs to learn more about what Jonathan underwent in Transylvania. So even though when they were wed, she promised that she would not open his diary unless it was in the direst of circumstances, she's now deemed that that time has arrived and she will need to open it. However, then she gets home and she finds a letter from Dr. Van Helsing saying that Mrs. Westenra's dead, Lucy's dead, and they were both buried today, so you missed that. Let's see, then we get to the service. Finally, the chapter ends with another entry from a newspaper. This time it's the Westminster Gazette. And the Westminster Gazette, it has a story basically about some children in the neighborhood who are claiming to have met a blue fur lady. And again, thank you to Judy Gordon for explaining what her annotated, or her footnotes in her editions explained what blue fur was. It did also match the annotated edition that I borrowed from a friend of mine here at the library. Blue fur is supposed to refer to a young child's sort of like lisping way of saying beautiful. So instead of a beautiful lady, they're saying she's a blue fur lady. So a blue fur lady. So they're saying that they have seen a beautiful woman who meets these children and sort of takes them out into the woods, into the darkness. And when they come back, they also have the little pinpricks on them. And so they're saying it's kind of interesting that all of the children seem to have these little wounds, slightly torn or wounded in the throat, and perhaps it's an animal or something like that. And the children, they're even playing games about the blue fur lady, that it just seems to be something that's happening now more and more. And so that's where we ended that chapter, with Lucy dead, Mina being curious about what happened with her husband, finally ready to explore that history, that secret of what happened in Transylvania, and somehow a mysterious blue fur lady feeding on the children of, what's that neighborhood? Was it Hampstead? Hampstead. Okay, so now we've talked about that. Today's tea, for me at least, is more the loose leaf chamomile tea, or it's the chamomile blossoms. I had some more of the Earl Grey tea earlier today and decided I should probably do an herbal tea for our reading. Otherwise I would go home and be all wired again. Which did happen the other day when I had, gosh, did I have 3 pots of the Earl Grey? It was delicious. But by the time I went home, like, okay, I need to cut it with a little bit of something uncaffeinated. So let's enjoy. I do like a chamomile tea. Yummy. Smells good, tastes great, just soothing and wonderful. Okay. It's kind of funny too, I was just looking out my window. It's a little gray outside. It's not quite rainy weather, but it's just starting to feel a little bit like winter's coming. I see someone else, thank you Pam, is having coffee today, but yeah, there's something when it feels kind of gray out. I always like to have a nice warm drink and a cozy book, so thank you for joining me on this little just cozy moment. Wonderful. Okay, let's go in. We're going to read chapter 14 today, and it is continuing, beginning with Mina Parker's journal. 23 September. Jonathan is better after a bad night. I am so glad that he has plenty of work to do, for that keeps his mind off the terrible things. And oh, I am rejoiced that he is not now weighed down with the responsibility of his new position. I knew he would be true to himself, and now, how proud I am to see my Jonathan rising to the height of his advancement and keeping pace in all ways with the duties that come upon him. He will be away all day till late, for he said he could not lunch at home. My household work is done, and so I shall take his foreign journal and lock myself up in my room and read it. 24 September. I hadn't the heart to write last night. That terrible record of Jonathan's upset me so. Poor dear, how he must have suffered, whether it be true or only imagination. I wonder if there is any truth in it at all. Did he get his brain fever and then write all those terrible things? Or had he some cause for it all? I suppose I shall never know, for I dare not open the subject to him.
When she
and
comes
yet,
on duty this
that
evening,
man
perhaps
we saw
Monsieur
yesterday,
could ask her.
He seemed quite certain of him. Poor fellow. I suppose it was the funeral upset him and sent his mind back on some train of thought. He believes it all himself. I remember how on our wedding day he said, "Unless some solemn duty come upon me to go back to the bitter hours, asleep or awake, mad or sane." There seems to be through it all some thread of continuity. That fearful Count was coming to London. If it should be, and he came to London with its teeming millions,
Prince James's
there may be a solemn duty, and if it comes, we must not shrink from it. I shall be prepared. I shall get my typewriter this very hour and begin transcribing. Then we shall be ready for other eyes if required. And if it be wanted, then perhaps, if I am ready, poor Jonathan may not be upset, for I can speak for him, and never let him be troubled or worried with it at all. If ever Jonathan quite gets over the nervousness, he may want to tell me of it all, and I can ask him questions and find out things, and see how I may comfort him. Letter, Van Helsing to Mrs. Harker, 24 September. Confidence. Dear Madam, I pray you to pardon my writing in that I am so far friend as that I sent to you sad news of Miss Lucy Westenra's death.
Hello?
By the kindness of Lord
This is
Godalming,
Gabriel
I am empowered to read her letters and papers, for I am deeply concerned about certain matters vitally important. In them, I find some letters from you, which show how great friends you were and how you love her.
Let me explain.
Oh, Madam Nina, by that love, I implore you, help me. It is for others' good that I ask, to redress great wrong and to lift much and terrible troubles that may be more great than you can know. May it be that I can see you, you can trust me. I am friend of Dr. John Seward and of Lord Godalming. That was Arthur of Miss Lucy.
Gabriel,
I must keep it private for the present from all. I should come to Exeter to see you at once if you tell me I am privileged to come, and where and when.
I'm afraid
I
our
implore your
investigation
pardon,
of the night
madam.
visitors
I
will
have
to
read
be
your
explained.
letters to poor Lucy,
I'll
and
send
know how
down some
good
men
you are and
to
how
look
your
into the
husband
kidnapping.
suffered.
Wait a minute.
So I pray
What makes you think the
if
night
it may
visitors
be,
weren't involved?
enlighten him not,
I don't
lest
have
it may
time to
harm.
explain.
Again,
Keep your
you're
eyes
pardoned,
open until
and
my men
forgive
arrive,
me,
if you would.
Van Helsing.
I'll send Miss Nakamura along. Oh,
Telegram,
and
Mrs.
naturally,
Harker to
your
Van Helsing,
travel expenses and the
25
fee we
September.
discussed will be taken
Come
care of.
today
that's
by
not
10:15 train
Goodbye,
if you can
Mr.
catch
Knight.
it. Can see
Perhaps I
you
will call on
anytime
you
you
again
call.
when I have time.
Wilhelmina
for such an
Harker.
act.
Good.
Miss Harker's Journal.
Goodbye.
Or Mina Harker's Journal, 25 September. I cannot help feeling terribly excited as the time draws near for the visit of Dr. Van Helsing, for somehow I expect that it will throw some light upon Jonathan's sad
That one's
experience.
occupied.
And as he attended poor dear
I
Lucy
don't
in her
hear
last
anything.
illness, he
Maybe
can
he's
tell
got
me
a
all about her.
long-winded telephone
That is the
appointment.
reason of his coming.
Then again,
It is concerning
maybe
Lucy
not.
and her sleepwalking, and not about Jonathan. Then I shall never
She
know
has
the
a
real
certain
truth now.
naive
How
barnyard
silly I
charm.
am. That awful journal gets hold of my imagination and tinges everything with something of its own color. Of course, it is about
Shouldn't
Lucy.
that painting be in the
That
dining
habit
room?
came back to the poor
no,
dear,
that
and that
would make
awful
too
night
much
on the
sense.
cliff must have made her ill. I had
Talk
almost
about your big
forgotten in my
hair.
own affairs how ill she was afterwards. She must have told him of her sleepwalking adventure on the cliff, and that I knew all about it. And now he wants me to tell him what I know so that he may understand. I hope I did right in not saying anything of it to Mrs. Westenra. I should never forgive myself if any act of mine, were it even a negative one, brought harm on poor dear
If that's
Lucy.
what I think it is, I can
I hope
die
too
happy
Dr. Van
now.
Helsing will not blame me. I have had so much trouble and anxiety of late that I feel I cannot bear more just at present.
Oh, great.
I suppose a cry does us all good at times, clears the air as other rain does. Perhaps he was reading the
how
journal
about some
yesterday that
coffee
upset
out
me,
here,
and then Jonathan
Mercy?
went away this morning to stay away from me a whole day and night, the first time we have been parted since
Thanks,
our
buddy.
marriage. I do hope the dear fellow will take care of himself and that nothing will occur to upset him. It is 2 o'clock, and the doctor will be here soon now. I shall say nothing of Jonathan's journal unless he
Gabriel.
asks me. I am so glad I have
Wanker.
typewritten out my own journal,
Mosley?
so that, in case
Is
he
that
asks
you?
about Lucy, I can hand it to
No,
him.
it's
It will
my
save
evil
much
twin.
questioning.
What the hell are you doing here, Matt?
What am I doing here? What are you doing
Later.
here?
I'm
He has come
I'm
and
on
gone.
vacation.
Oh, what a
I'm here with,
strange meeting,
tour
and how it
group.
all makes my head
kind of
whirl
tour
round.
You know,
I feel like
the
one in a
touring
dream.
kind.
And you
Can it
guys
be all
came
possible?
here?
Or even
Well,
a
it's
part
kind
of
of
it?
special.
If I had not read Jonathan's
it's
journal
a
first,
special
I
treasure
should
hunting
never have
tour.
accepted even a
Treasure.
possibility.
What treasure?
Poor,
Look,
poor
read the
dear
brochures,
Jonathan.
okay?
How
I'm
he
not
must have
freaking
suffered.
tour guide.
Please the good
Jeez,
God.
nice to see
All
you
this may
too.
not upset him
So
again.
what are you
I shall
doing
try
here
to
again?
save him from it, but it may be even
I
a
can see
consolation and a help to
What?
him.
Sure.
Terrible though it be,
I called your
and
number
awful
at
in
the
its
Right, of
consequences,
course.
to know for
Forgot I
certain
mentioned.
that his
Yeah.
eyes and ears and brain
it's great
did
to
not
see.
deceive him,
Y-
and that it is
yeah.
all
If you want to join the
true.
tour, you'll have to talk to Madeline.
may be that it is the-
She's around here somewhere.
It may be
And,
that it is
come
the
up to
doubt
the room
which
later,
haunts
would
him,
you?
that when the
I'm
doubt
in
is
room
removed,
33.
no matter
Sure.
which, waking
And,
or dreaming,
thanks for
may prove
surprising
the
me,
truth,
old
he'll be more
pal.
satisfied and better able to bear the
No
shock.
problem.
Dr. Van Helsing must be a good man, as well as a clever one, if he is Arthur's friend and Dr. Seward's, and if they brought him all the way from Holland to look after Lucy. I feel from having seen him
Mosley?
that he is
In
good
Rennes-le-Château?
and kind and of a noble
Well,
nature.
Are you as confused
When he comes
as I
tomorrow,
am?
I shall ask him about Jonathan, and
Two
then,
lonely
please God,
guys
all of this sorrow
in
and
hats.
anxiety may lead to a good end. I used to think I would like to practice interviewing. Jonathan's friend on the Exeter News
She's kind
told
of
him
cute,
that memory was everything in such
What
work,
do you suppose
that you
he's
must be
doing?
able to put down exactly
Exactly.
almost every word spoken, even if you had to refine some of it afterwards.
I
Here was
hope
a
they
rare
don't
interview.
actually
I shall
cook
try to
in
record it
that.
verbatim. It was 2:30 when the knock
Pottery.
came.
What's up
I
with
took
that?
my courage à deux mains and waited. In a few minutes, Mary opened the door and announced
Hey,
Dr.
a
Van
painting
Helsing.
of diners
I rose
for
and
a
bowed and
dining
he came
room.
towards me. A man of
Clever.
medium weight, strongly built, with his shoulders set back over a
Nothing
broad,
like
deep chest,
choo-choos
and a
to
neck
help
well
you work
balanced
up
on the
an
trunk,
appetite.
as the head is on the neck. The poise of the head strikes me at once as indicative of thought and power.
White
The
stuff.
head is noble, well-sized, broad,
Real men
and large
drink it
behind the
black.
ears. The face, clean-shaven, shows a hard, square chin, a large,
Packages
resolute,
of maple
mobile mouth,
syrup.
a good-sized nose, rather straight, but with the quick, sensitive nostrils that seem to broaden as the big, bushy brows come down and the mouth tightens. The forehead is broad and fine, rising at first almost straight, and then sloping back above two bumps or ridges wide apart. Such a forehead that the reddish hair cannot possibly tumble over it, but
There's a
falls
guy
naturally
reading a
back into
newspaper
the
in the
sides.
lounge.
Big, dark blue eyes are set widely apart and are quick and tender or stern with the man's moods. He said to
Hey,
me,
how you doing?
Mrs. Harker, is it
My
not?
name is Knight,
I
Gabriel
bowed
Knight.
assent.
And I
That
am
was
Emilio
Miss Mina
Baza.
Murray.
Emilio.
Again, I assented.
Interesting name.
It is Mina
Where you
Murray
from,
that I came
anyway?
to see.
The
The was
Middle
friend
East,
of that poor
originally.
dear child,
Huh.
Lucy Westenra.
Hey, you with that
Madam
tour
Mina,
group
it
by
is on
any
account of
chance?
the dead
I am.
I come.
Yes, I am.
Sir, I said, you could have no better claim on me than that
Nice
you were a
place,
friend
huh?
and helper of
Did
Lucy
you get in last
Westenra.
night?
And I held
Yes.
out my hand.
Not too
He
late,
took it
I
and
hope.
said tenderly,
Not late, no.
Oh, Madam
Did you
Mina,
drive in?
I
A
know
friend
that the
dropped
friend
me
of that
off.
poor Lily
I'm
girl
not
must be
crazy
good,
about flying.
but I had
I'm
yet
owning
to
a
learn.
vehicle.
He
Such a
finished his
nuisance.
speech with a courtly bow. I asked him what it was
Are
that he
you
wanted
a
to see me
treasure
about,
hunter,
so he at once
Emilio?
began,
I suppose
I
I
have
am,
read your letters to
but
Miss
riches can
Lucy.
be measured in
Forgive
many
me, but I
ways.
had to begin to
Well,
inquire
that's true
somewhere,
enough.
and there was none
So
to ask.
what do you think the treasure
I
is?
know that you were with her at
Oh,
Whitby.
I would not presume
She
to
sometimes
say,
kept a
Mr.
diary.
Knight. At least,
You need not look
out
surprised,
loud.
Madam Mina. It was begun after you had left, and was an imitation of you. And in that diary, she traces by inference certain things to a sleepwalking in which she puts down that you saved her. In great perplexity, then, I come to you and ask you out of your
Don't mind
and
if
ask
I
you out
do.
of your so much kindness to tell me all of it that you can remember. I can tell you, I think, Dr. Van Helsing, all about it. Ah, then, you have good memory for facts, for details? It is not always so with young ladies. No, doctor, but I wrote it all down at the time. I can show it to you if you like. Oh, Madam Mina, I will be grateful. You will
Well,
do me
hi.
much favor.
You must be
I could not
Madeline
resist the
Beaton.
temptation of
Perhaps.
mystifying him a bit.
Who are
I
you?
suppose it is some of the
Gabriel
taste of the
Knight.
original apple
You know
that remains
Mosley
still in our
from your
mouths.
tour?
So I
We
handed
go
him the
way
shorthand
back.
diary.
Uh-huh.
He took it with a
I
grateful
should
bow
have
and said,
recognized his
"May I read it?"
accent.
If
What
you wish,
accent?
I answered as demurely as I could.
Never mind.
He opened it,
So,
and for an
you know
instant
Monsieur
his face
Mosley?
fell.
Oh,
Then
yeah.
he stood up and
I was
bowed.
wondering how much you charged me to,
Oh,
hang with the
you
group.
so
Give me
clever
enough paying for
woman,
my
he
own
said.
hotel and all.
I knew long that Mr.
2,000
Jonathan was a
francs.
man of much
Kind of
thankfulness.
steep,
But
isn't it?
see, his wife
This is
have
the
all the good
price of
things.
success.
And
Do
will
wish
you
to find
not
the
so much
treasure
honor
or
me,
not?
and so help
I'll
me, as
think
to
about
read
it.
it for me? Alas, I know not the shorthand.
When did y'all
By
get
this
in?
time, my little joke was over, and I
Last
was
night.
almost ashamed.
Late?
So I
No.
took the typewritten copy
Why
from my
you
work
ask?
basket and handed
Just
it to him.
curious how long
Forgive
it took.
me, I
you
said.
drove it?
I could not
Yes.
help it. But I had
From
been
Toulouse.
thinking that it was
It's
of dear
about,
Lucy that you
2
wished to
hours.
ask, and so that you might not have time to wait,
Who
not
all
on
came
my
in the van?
account, but because I know your
Most
time
of the
must be
group flew
precious.
into Toulouse.
I have written it out
John
on the
Wilkes, Lady
typewriter for
Howard,
you.
Miss Stiles,
He
and
took it,
your
and his
friend,
eyes glistened.
Mosley.
You
Mrs.
are
Buchanan
so
and
good,
Baza made
he
their
said.
own arrangements.
And may I read it now? I may want to ask you some things
So,
when I have
what's
read.
this tour group do, anyway?
I guide my clients.
By all means,
through
I
the
said.
facts of the
Read it over
mystery
whilst I order
and show
lunch,
them
and then
the
you can ask me
important
questions
locations.
whilst we eat.
From there,
He bowed
they
and
can
settled
draw their
himself in a
own
chair with his back to the light,
Well,
and became
how
absorbed in
come
the
you're not
papers,
guiding
whilst
them
I went to
right
see
now?
after lunch,
There
chiefly
is
in
a
order
lot
that
to
he might not
observe
be
in the
disturbed.
town itself,
When I
Monsieur
came
Knight.
back, I
Tomorrow
found him
morning at
walking
9
hurriedly
a.m. will
up
be the
and down
first
the
guided
room,
lecture.
his face all ablaze with excitement. He rushed
I'll
up to me
still
and took
think
me by
about it.
both hands. "Oh, Madam Mina,"
So,
he said,
you're the
"how can I
expert,
say what I
right?
owe to you?
What's
This
your
paper
theory
is
about the
as
treasure
sunshine.
around
It
the
opens the
chateau?
gate to me.
I leave
I
that
am
to my
dazed.
clients.
I am
It is
dazzled
better
with
that
so
way,
much light,
no?
and yet clouds roll in behind the light every time. But that you do not,
Guess he's getting some
cannot
fresh air.
comprehend. Oh, but I am grateful to you, you so clever woman. Madam," he said this very solemnly, "if ever Abraham Van Helsing can do anything
I was
for
speaking
you
at the
or
hotel
yours,
register.
I
You wouldn't
trust
by any
you will
chance
let me
recall
know.
the actual
It will be
times
pleasure
people
and
checked
delight
in, would you?
if I may serve you as a
we
friend,
have a small hotel.
as a friend.
This is why we do
but
not
all I
require
have
so
ever
precisely
learned,
the time
all
check
I can
in,
ever
the time
do
check out.
shall be for
I
you
myself
and
might
those
remember,
you love.
but I was not
There
on
are
duty last night.
darknesses in life, and there are lights.
You've got a tour group
You
staying
are
here.
one of the lights.
They fill the
You will
hotel.
have happy
We
life
have only
and
the
good
7
life,
rooms and they
and your
have taken
husband will be
every
blessed
room
in
but
you.
your room, monsieur.
But
If I
doctor, you
might
praise
say,
me too much,
Monsieur is most
and you do
fortunate to
not
get his
know
room.
me.
Particularly
know
since he did
you.
not make the
I,
reservation,
who am
n'est-ce
old
pas?
and who have studied
Oh,
all my
yeah.
life, men and women.
I'm lucky as
I,
always.
who have
Yeah.
made my specialty the brain, and
Do you know
all that
anything
belongs
about
to
the
him,
tour group,
and all that
John?
follow from him.
No, monsieur.
And
You
I
should
have
have to
read your
speak with the
diary
mouth
that you
of
have
the
so
horse
goodly
itself.
written for me, in which
Mademoiselle
breathes
Butane
out
is the
truth
tour
in
group
every
leader.
line. I, who have read your so
I hear
sweet
there's
letter to
supposed
poor
to be a
Lucy
treasure
of your
hunt
marriage,
here. You know
and
anything about it?
The
and
Chamber
your
of
trust
Commerce,
not
they
know
asked
you?
me to sound mysterious.
Oh, Madame Mina, good
But
women tell all
between
their
you and I,
lives,
Monsieur
and
Knight,
by day, and by
I
hour,
seek
and
the
by minute,
trésor.
such things that angels can read.
Neath?
And
No
we
offense.
men who wish to know
I
have in us
hope
something
you are
of
proving
angels'
me wrong.
eyes. Your husband is noble nature, and you are noble too. For you trust, and trust cannot be where there is mean nature. And your husband, tell me of him. Is he quite well? Is all that fever gone, and is he strong and hearty? I saw here an opening to ask him about Jonathan, so I said,
Must not be
he
a
was
lot of
almost
cats
recovered,
around here.
but he has been greatly upset by Mr.
Reminds
Hawkins'
me of
death.
the presents
He
the
interrupted.
voodoo group
Oh,
left me.
yes, I know. I have read your last 2 letters. I went on.
Well, gee,
I
I
suppose
don't
this
need a
upset
live
him,
chicken at
for
the
when we
moment.
were in town on Thursday last, he's had a sort of shock. A shock? And after brain fever so soon? That is not good. What kind of a shock was it? He thought he saw
I think it's a
someone who recalled
bookstore.
something terrible, something which led to his brain fever. And here the whole thing seemed to overwhelm me
Secrets
in a
of the
rush.
Holy Grail.
The pity for Jonathan,
I wonder
the
if that
horror
book's
which
got
he
something to
experienced,
do with
the
this
whole
area.
fearful mystery of his diary, and the
Unfortunately,
fear
the
that he's
store
been
is
brooding over
closed.
me ever since, all came in a tumult. I suppose I was hysterical, for I threw myself on my knees and held up my hands to him
Grail.
and implored him to make my husband well again. He took my hands and raised me up and made me sit on the sofa and sat by me. He held my hand in his and said to me with, oh, such infinite sweetness, my life is a barren and lonely one, and so full of work that I have not had much time for friendships. But since I have been summoned to here by my friend John Seward, I have known so many good people and seen such nobility that I feel more than ever, and it has grown with my advancing years, the loneliness of my life. Believe me then that I come here full of respect
They're
for
open
you,
all day.
and you have given me hope. Hope, not in what I am seeking of, but that there are good women still left to make life happy. Good women, whose lives and whose truths may make good lesson for the children that are to be. I am glad that I may here be of some use to you, for if your husband suffer, he suffer within the range of my study and experience. I promise you that I will gladly do all for him that I can, all to make his life strong and manly,
I'm
and your life
assuming
a
she
happy
works
one.
here.
Now you must eat. You are overwrought and perhaps over
How are
anxious.
ya? You run this
Husband Jonathan
place?
would not like to see you so pale, and what
Nice to meet you. The name
and
is
what
Knight.
he liked not where he loved is not
And
to his
you
good.
are...
Therefore, for his sake, you must eat
there
and
something
smile.
I can help
You have
you
told
with?
me about Lucy,
There
and so
might
now
be.
we shall not speak of it, lest it distress.
Have you heard
I
a
shall
baby
stay in
crying
Exeter
in the
tonight,
past 24
for I want to
hours?
think
I
much
have
over what
3
you have told me.
grandchildren.
And when I
What
have
do you
thought,
think?
I will ask you questions if I may. And then
Is
too,
there
you
anything
will tell
special
me
I
of
should
husband
know about
Jonathan's
town?
trouble,
The
so far as you
displays will
can.
tell you the history
But not yet.
of Rennes
You
le
must eat
Château.
now. Afterwards, you shall tell me all.
Say, were you around
After
last
lunch,
night?
when we went back
I
to the
was
drawing
at
room,
home,
he said
monsieur.
to me,
Oh,
and now,
you didn't happen to
tell
see
me
anyone
all
coming
about
into
him.
town, did you? Late? Around
When
11?
it came to speaking
I
to
am
this great
well
learned
asleep
man,
by
I began to fear that he
The
would think me a
early
weak
bird
fool,
catches the
and Jonathan a
worm, you
madman.
know.
That journal is all
Yeah.
so
And what an
strange.
incentive
And I
that is,
hesitated to
too.
go on. But he was so
Say,
sweet and
does
kind,
the
and he had
Holy
promised
Grail
to
have
help,
something to do
and I
with
trusted
this
him.
area?
So I said, Dr. Van Helsing, what I have to tell you is so
And
queer
what
that
would
you
the
must not
connection
laugh
be
at me or at my husband.
Some believe the
I have been
Templars
since
found
yesterday in a sort
sacred
of fever
Christian
of doubt.
treasure in the Holy
You
Land.
must be kind
When
to
they
me
were
and not think me
persecuted,
foolish
they
that I
would
have
have
even
ended
half
in a spa.
believed some very
It
strange
really
things.
is not that
He reassured me
difficulty,
by his
monsieur.
manner as well as his words when he
Sacred
said,
Christian treasure.
"Oh, my
like
dear,
the Holy Grail?
if you
Possibly.
only knew how strange
The
is the
most
matter
famous
regarding which I
Grail
am
story,
here,
written by
it is you who
Wolfenbach,
would laugh.
was set in
I have
Languedoc.
learned not to
Did
think
you know
little of
that,
anyone's
monsieur?
belief,
Uh-uh.
no matter how
No.
strange it may
Of
be.
course you did
I have
not.
tried to keep an open mind, and it is not the ordinary things of
You
life that
mentioned
should close it,
Templars,
but the
as in
strange
the
things,
Knights
the
Templars?
extraordinary things,
Were they really
the
from this?
things
If
that
you
make
wish
one
to know
doubt
about
if
the
they be mad
Templars,
or
read
sane.
the history book.
Thank you, thank you, thank
There's
you a
supposed to be some
thousand
kind of treasure
times.
buried around
You
here,
have taken a
right?
weight off my
Yes,
mind.
that
If you will
is
let
the
me,
theory.
I shall give you a paper to
Well,
read.
What kind
It
of
is
treasure
long,
is it?
but I have typewritten it
That
out.
is part of the
It will tell you my
mystery,
trouble and
monsieur.
Jonathan's. It is the copy of his journal when abroad
Okay.
and all that happened.
So what are
I
some
dare
of the
not say
possible
anything of it.
treasures?
You will
Gold
read for
stores
yourself
of the
and judge.
Romans, the
And then, when I
fabulous
see
wealth
you,
of the
perhaps you will be
Visigoths,
very
which was
kind
never
and tell me
found.
what you think.
The fabulous
I
wealth
promise,
of the
he said,
Merovingians,
as I gave him the
which was
papers.
never found.
I shall in the morning,
Or
so soon as
it
I can,
could be the
come to see
fabulous
you and your
wealth of the
husband, if I
Cathars,
may.
Which,
Yeah, I gotcha. The Templars too, right?
but of course.
Jonathan will be
They
here at
have more
11:30,
fabulous
and you
wealth
must
than
come to
anyone.
lunch with us and see
Why
him
do
then.
you think that
You can
French
catch the quick
pig-dog of a
3:34
king
train,
turned
which
on
will
them?
leave you at Paddington before 8. He was
Aren't you
surprised at my
French
knowledge
in
of the
this
trains
region?
offhand,
Well,
but he does not know that I've made up
France
all the
thinks so.
trains to and from Exeter, so that I may help Jonathan
Any
in
other
case he's
theories
in a
on the
hurry.
possible treasure?
So he took the
Well,
papers with
the
him and went
Romans
away.
did destroy
and I
the
sit here
Temple of
thinking,
Jerusalem, stole
thinking,
sacred
I
Hebrew
don't know what.
artifacts. Perhaps it is the
Letter
lost
by
treasure
hand,
of Jerusalem
Van Helsing
that
to
is
Mrs.
buried
Harper,
around here.
25
And
September,
then
6 o'clock.
there is this
Dear
one
Madam
theory.
Nina,
Yes.
I have read
never mind.
your husband's
I
so
am a
wonderful
good
diary.
Catholic woman
You may
myself.
sleep without doubt.
Why don't you
Strange
read up on
and
the
terrible as
subject
it is,
if you are so
It
very
is
interested?
true. I will pledge my life on it. It may be worse for others, but for him and you there is no dread. He is a noble fellow, and let me tell you from experience of men, that one who would do as he did in going down that wall into that room, aye, and going a second time, is not one to be injured in permanence by a shock. His brain and his heart are all right. This I swear before I have even seen him. So be at
Jeez,
rest.
how paranoid.
I shall have much
They
to
stop
ask him of
talking
other
if I
things.
get too close.
I am blessed
as if
that
I
today
really
I
care
come
what
to
they're
see you,
saying.
for I have learned all at once so much
Oh.
that again I am dazzled more than ever, and I must think. Yours the most faithful, Abraham Van Helsing. Letter, Mrs. Harker to Van Helsing, 25 September, 6:30 p.m. My dear Dr. Van Helsing, 1,000 thanks for your kind letter, which has taken a great weight off my mind. And yet, if it be true, what terrible things there are in the world, and what an awful thing if that man, that monster,
My
be
goodness,
really
Estelle,
in London.
look at this.
I
It's the
fear to
sacred
think.
number of
I have
Ra.
this moment,
You're
whilst
right,
writing,
Lily.
had a wire
And
from
look,
Jonathan,
it says
saying that he
Virgo.
leaves by the 6:25
Isis.
tonight from
And
Law.
Trinus
Launceston,
Eunice.
and will be here at
301,
10:18,
isn't it?
So
Or
that
am
I
I
shall have no
conjugating
fear
badly?
tonight.
Oh,
Will you,
I'm
therefore,
afraid I never
instead of
had
lunching
Latin.
with us,
Well, I
please to come to
think
breakfast
I'm
at 8
right.
o'clock, if this be not
Do you
too
suppose
early
they're
for you?
referring to Nat
You
Horace
can
and
get away if you
Osiris?
are in a hurry by the 10:30
They
train,
could be
which will bring you
referring
to
to
Paddington by
God,
2:35.
Jesus,
Do not
and
answer
the Holy
this, as I shall
Ghost.
take it that, if
Couldn't
I
they?
do not hear,
Don't
you will
be
come to breakfast.
stupid. Anyway,
Believe me,
Dr. Wen
your
says it's all the
faithful
same
and
thing.
grateful friend,
Or was that Mary, God,
Nina
and
Harker.
Jesus? Look at that shape.
Jonathan
Wasn't there
Harker's
something
journal,
like that in
26
Dr. Wen's
September.
sacred geometry?
I thought never to write in this
Do you
diary
want to
again.
give everything
but the
away?
time has come.
Oh, sorry.
When I got home last night, Nina had supper ready, and when we had supped, she told me of Van Helsing's visit, and of her having given him the 2 diaries copied out,
There's
and
a
of
couple
how
of
anxious
beauteous
she has been
dames.
about me.
All right.
She showed
so
me the
I'm
doctor's
feeling
letter
generous.
that all I wrote down was true. It seems to have made a new man of me. It was the doubt
Good
as to the
morning,
reality of the whole
ladies.
thing that knocked
Look,
me over.
Estelle, the
I felt
gentleman has come over to
impotent and in the dark
introduce
and
himself.
distrustful.
Isn't that
But
charming?
now that I
Well,
know,
I've tried.
I am not afraid,
The name's
even
Knight.
of the Count.
Gabriel
He
Knight.
has
Yes.
succeeded after
How
all
do you
then
do,
in
Mr.
his
Knight?
design in getting to London.
I'm Estelle
and it
Stiles.
was he I saw.
And this
He
is
has got
Lady
younger.
Lily Howard. Renowned on
Van
stage and
Helsing is the
screen.
man to unmask
Now
him and
you're
hunt
thinking,
him out.
how
if he
modest,
is
how
anything
petite,
like
and
what
of
Mina
course,
says.
I
We
am
sat late and talked
Lily.
it all over. Mina is dressing, and I shall
Are you
call
with
the
the tour
hotel in a
group?
few minutes and
He's
bring
a
him over.
sly one, Estelle.
Yes, Mr. Knight.
He was,
We
I
are.
think, surprised
What about
to see
you,
me.
dear boy?
When I came into the room
I thought
where
we'd
he
met
was and
everyone
introduced
this
myself,
morning.
he took me by the shoulder and turned
I'm
my
a friend
face
of
round to the
Mosley's.
light and said, after a sharp scrutiny, "But Madame Mina told me you were ill.
Are
that
you
had
all
had a
here
shock."
looking for the treasure?
It was so funny to hear my wife called Madame Mina by
Well,
this
we can hardly
kindly,
deny it
strong-faced
since we're
old
on
man.
the tour.
I
But it's
smiled
not
and
as though we
said,
have a theory,
"I
Mr.
was
Knight.
ill.
Estelle,
I have
you're so
had a shock.
subtle.
But you
Oh,
have
yeah,
cured me
you got
already.
a theory?
how?
Well, let me hear
By
it.
your letter to
Is
Mina
that a
last
note
night.
of ridicule,
I was
I
in
hear?
doubt, and then
Can it
everything
be?
took
No,
a hue
I
of
didn't.
unreality.
Do you think
and I
perhaps
did not
that
know
only
what to trust,
men can
even
have
the evidence
valid
of my own
theories?
senses. Not knowing what to trust,
Hardly.
I did not know
It's
what
just
to
the
do,
whole idea
and
of
so
it.
had only to
Lily.
keep on working in
Are we to
what
take
had
it that you
hitherto been the groove
yourself
of my
have
life.
no theory, sir?
The groove
About the treasure?
ceased to avail me, and
no,
I mistrusted
I
myself.
don't.
Methinks he
Doctor,
doth
you
protest
don't
too
know
much.
what it is to doubt
It's
everything,
possible.
even yourself. No, you don't.
You wouldn't by any
couldn't
chance
with
be here
eyebrows
looking
like
for the Holy
yours.
Grail, would you?
Ah,
He seemed
but we
pleased
all
and laughed as he
seek the
said,
Holy
"So,
Grail.
you are a
You mean
physiognomist.
everyone
I
on the
learn more
tour?
here with each hour.
No, little
I am
man.
with so much pleasure
All
coming to you to
mankind.
breakfast.
The
And
correct
sir,
question
you
is
will
not,
pardon praise
do
from an
you
old
seek
man,
the Grail,
but you are
but
blessed in your
do you
wife."
know what the Grail
I would
is?
listen to him go on
what is
praising
it?
Mina for a day, so I simply nodded and stood silent. She is one of God's women, fashioned by his own hand to show us men and other women that there is a heaven where we can enter, and that its light
These
can be here
panels
on
tell
earth.
the history of the
So
Rennes-le-Château
true, so
area.
sweet, so noble, so little an egoist, and that, let me tell you, is much in this age, so skeptical and selfish. And you, sir, I have read all the letters to poor Miss Lucy, and some of them speak of you, so I know you since some days from the knowing of others. But I have seen your true self since last night. You will give me your hand, will you not? And let us be friends for all our lives. We shook hands, and he was so earnest and so kind that it made me quite choky. "And now," he said, "may I ask you for some more help? I have a great task to do, and at the beginning it is to know. You can help me here. Can you tell me what went before you're going to Transylvania? Later on I may ask more help and of a different kind, but at first this will do." "Look here, sir," I said, "does what you have to do concern the Count?" "It does," he said solemnly. "Then I am with you heart and soul. As you go by the 10:30 train, you will not have time to read them, but I shall get the bundle of papers. You can take them with you and read them in the train." After breakfast, I saw him to the station. When we were parting, he said, "Perhaps you will come to town if I send for you, and take Madame Mina too."
This side
We shall
tells the
both
story
come
of
when
that
you will,
Abbé
I said.
Saunière.
I had got him the morning papers and the London papers of the previous night, and while we were talking in the carriage window, waiting for the train to start, he was turning them over. His eyes suddenly seemed to catch something in one of them, the Westminster Gazette. I knew it by the color, and he grew quite white. He read something intently, groaning to himself. Mein Gott, so soon! I do not think he remembered me at the moment. Just then the whistle blew and the train moved off. This recalled him to himself, and he leaned out of the window and waved his hand, calling out, "Love to Madame Mina. I shall write so soon as ever I can." Dr. Seward's Diary, 26th September. Truly, there is no such thing as finality. Not a week since I said finis, and yet here I am starting fresh again, or rather going on with the same record. Until this afternoon I had no cause to think of what is done. Renfield had become, by all intents, as sane as he ever was. He was already well ahead with his fly business, and he had just started in the spider line also, so he had not been of any trouble to me. I had a letter from Arthur, written on Sunday, and from it I gather that he is bearing up wonderfully well. Quincy Morris is with him, and that is much of a help, for he himself is a bubbling well of good spirits. Quincy wrote me a line too, and from him I hear that Arthur is beginning to recover something of his old
It's an
buoyancy.
angel holding
So
a
as to
devil
them,
in chains.
all my mind is at rest.
Odd.
As
I've
for
never seen
myself,
Satan drawn
I was
quite
settling
like
down
that.
to my work with the enthusiasm which I used to have for it, so that
I
I
think
might
he's the
fairly
guy
have
the
said
museum's
the wound
named
which poor
after,
Lucy left on me
Saunière.
was becoming cicatriced.
It's
Everything
a
is,
letter
however, now
in French.
reopened. And what is to be the end, God only knows.
Adam and
I have an
Eve.
idea that
I
Van
never
Helsing
liked that
thinks
story.
he knows, too.
Can you
but he
imagine
will
there
only
being
let out
only
enough
one
of it,
woman
enough
on
at
the
a time to
entire
whet
planet?
curiosity.
Ooh, God.
He went to Exeter yesterday and stayed there all night. Today he came back and almost bounded into the room at about 5:30 and thrust last night's Westminster Gazette into my hand. What do you think of that? He asked
So
as he
where
stood back and
did
folded his arms.
Saunière get his money from?
I
If
looked
I
over
could
the paper,
answer
for I
that,
really
monsieur,
did not know what he
do
meant.
you think I'd be
But
sitting
he took
here?
it from me and pointed out a paragraph about children being decoyed away at Hampstead. It did not convey much to me until I reached a passage when it described small puncture wounds on their throats. An idea struck me, and I looked up. Well, he said, it is like poor Lucy's. And what do you make of it? Simply that there is some cause in common. Whatever it was that injured her has injured them. I did not quite understand his answer. That is true indirectly, but not directly. How do you mean, Professor? I asked. I was a little inclined to take his seriousness lightly, for after all, 4 days of rest and freedom from burning, harrowing anxiety does help to restore one's spirits. But when I saw his face, it sobered me.
I've
Never,
been waiting to get you alone,
even in the
Maddie.
midst of our despair
I don't
about
like to
poor
brag in
Lucy,
front of the
had he
others.
looked more stern.
I think you're going to be surprised at how this
Tell
tour
me,
turns
he
out.
said. I can
Might bring
hazard
some
no
fame your
opinion.
way.
I do
Help
not
you.
know what to
Are
think,
you
and I have no
implying,
data
Monsieur
on which
Wilkes,
to
that
on
you
which to found a
intend to find
conjecture.
the treasure? This
Do you mean to
trip?
tell me,
That's
dear
right.
friend,
You will
that
have
you
my
have
full
no
attention when you
suspicion as to
do.
what
You don't
poor
believe
Lucy
me?
died of?
I got
Not
this
after
theory,
all the
see?
hints
Monsieur
given,
Wilkes,
not only by events,
everyone
but by
has a
me?
theory.
Of
Yeah,
nervous
but they ain't
prostration
got what I
following
got.
on great loss or
You can
waste
write
of
that up and
blood.
take it to the bank.
And
Really?
how the blood
And what
loss
do you
or
have
waste?
that is so unusual?
I shook my head. He stepped
Why don't you
over
come
and
by
sat
my
down
room
beside
tonight
me
and
and went
find
on.
out?
You are a
I got
clever
this
man,
big piece of
friend
equipment,
John.
see?
Oh,
You reason well,
je
and your wit is bold,
comprends.
but you are
However
too
big
prejudiced.
your equipment,
You
monsieur,
do not let
I've
your
no
eyes
doubt seen
see
something
nor your
very
ears
much
hear.
like it before.
And that which is outside
Besides,
your daily life
I
is not of
probably have
account
other
to you.
plans.
Do you not think that there are things which you cannot understand, and yet which are? That some people see things that others
I haven't
cannot?
seen that guy before.
But there are things old and new which must not be contemplated by men's eyes, because they know, or think they know, some things which other men have told them.
I don't think we've met.
It
I'm
is the
Gabriel
fault of our
Knight.
science
Knight,
that it
eh?
wants to explain
Wilkes is
all.
the name.
And
John
if it
Wilkes.
explain not,
Australian.
then it says
That's
there is
right.
nothing to explain.
And you're a Yank.
But
If you
yet
mean
we
American,
see around
yeah.
us every day the
But there are
growth of
certain
new
branches
beliefs,
of my family
which
tree
think
that'd shoot
themselves
you
new,
for that one.
and which are yet
Are you
but
with
the
the tour?
old, which
Yeah,
pretend to
I'm
be
with the
young,
tour.
like the
Look,
fine
I'm all for
ladies
being
of
friendly
the
like,
opera.
but my lunch is
I
getting
suppose
cold.
now you do
Oh,
not believe
sure.
in corporeal
We'll
transference.
we'll talk later.
No? Nor in materialization? No? Nor in astral bodies? No? Nor in the reading of thought? No? Nor in hypnotism? Yes, I said. Charcot has proved that pretty well. He smiled as he went on. And then you are satisfied as to it. Yes? And of course then you understand how it act, and can follow the mind of the great Charcot. Alas, that he is no more. Into the very soul of the patient that he influenced. No? Then, friend John,
Mr.
am I to
Knight?
take it that you simply accept fact and are satisfied to let from premise to conclusion be a blank? No? Then tell me, for I am
There
student
you
of the
are,
brain,
ladies.
how
I
you accept
greatly
the
appreciate your
How you
understanding.
accept the hypnotism and reject the thought reading. Let me tell you, my friend, that there are things
I'm
done
sure you'll be
today
able
in
to repay
electrical
us
science
somehow,
which
Mr.
would have been
Bowser,
deemed unholy
when
by
the
the very
time
man who
comes.
discovered electricity.
Move along now,
who had
Estelle.
themselves not so long
I really
before been
must
burned
rest.
as wizards. There are always
you, Mr.
mysteries of
Bowser.
life.
Oh, thank
Why
you,
was it that
Miss
Methuselah lived
Stiles.
900 years and old Parr 169? And yet that poor Lucy, with 4 men's blood in her poor veins, could not live even one day. For had she lived one more day, we could have saved her. Do you know all the mystery of life and death? Do you know the altogether of comparative anatomy, and can say wherefore the qualities of brutes are in some men and not in others? Can you tell me why, when other spiders die small and soon, that one great spider lived for centuries in the tower of the old Spanish church and grew, till on descending he could drink the oil of all the church lamps? Can you tell me why in the Pampas, aye, and elsewhere, there are bats that come at night and open the veins of cattle and horses and suck dry their veins? How in some islands of the western seas there are bats which hang on the trees all day?
Could you tell me
and
what
those
is meant
who
by
have
this?
seen
It
describe
means
as like
by
giant
this
nuts or
sign
pods,
shall
and that
you
when the
conquer
sailors
it.
sleep in the dark,
It.
because that
What is
it?
it? The proper
Lit
phrase
down on
is
them,
parce
and then-
signe tu vaincras.
And then, in the
By
morning,
this
I
sign
found
shall
dead
you
men.
conquer,
Why,
meaning
is
naturally
it Miss
the sign
Lucy
of the
was?
cross.
I am aware that there's been a slight modification.
Good
yes.
God, Professor, I
To
said,
what end?
starting up.
What is the
Do you
it
mean
to which
tell
the
me
words
that
refer?
Lucy was bitten
Monsieur,
by such a
the
bat?
Abbé
And that
Saunier
such a thing is
designed
here in
this
London
statue.
in the 19th
What he
century?
meant by this,
He waved
or
his
by
hand for
any
silence
of the
and went on.
decorations in the church,
Can you
we
tell
can
me
only
why the
surmise.
tortoise lives
I
more
see.
long than generations
If
of
that
men?
is your answer,
Why the
then you
elephant
cannot be of
goes
service to
on
me.
and
Good
on
day,
till he has
monsieur.
seen dynasties, and why the parrots never die only of bite of cat or dog or other complaints? Can you tell me why men believe in all ages and places that there are some few who live on always if they be permit? That there are men and women who
And I
cannot
thought that
die?
only American tourists with that
We all
rude.
know, because science has vouched for the fact, that there have been toads shut up in rocks for thousands of years, shut in one so small hole that only hold him since the youth of the world.
Are you with the tour?
Can you tell me how the Indian fakir
Si, signore.
can make himself to
who are
die
you?
and have
My
been
name's
buried,
Knight.
and his
My
grave
friend
sealed
Mosley
and
is
corn
on your
sowed on it?
tour.
And the
Ah,
corn
I am
reaped
Bukele,
and be
Vittorio
cut and
Bukele.
sown and reaped and cut
Nice to
again.
meet you.
And then
How do
men
you like
come
the
and
tour
take away
so
the
far?
unbroken seal, and that there
I am
lie
enjoying
the
it. Yes,
Indian
thank you.
faker, not dead, but that rise up and walk
Did you
amongst
get
them as
in late
before?
last night, Senor
Here, I interrupted
Lucelli?
him. I was
Signore.
getting bewildered. He's
Yes,
so crowded
it
on my
was quite
mind
late.
with lists of
Did you
nature's
drive, or-
eccentricities
I took
and
a train.
possible
Oh, yeah?
impossibilities
I
that
came
my
in last
imagination
night
was
by
getting
train.
fired.
What
I had a
train
dim
were you
idea
on?
that he was teaching me some lesson
from,
as long ago
from
he used
Naples.
to do in his study at Amsterdam. But
So,
he used them to
what do
tell
you
me
think
the
of the
thing
church?
so that I
It
could have
isn't
the
a
object of
church.
thought in mind all the
They
time.
should make that
But
clear.
now I was
It's
without
not a
the thought.
church?
Yet I
No,
wanted
this
to
parish
follow
was
him,
closed
so
years
I said,
ago. The building is a tourist
"Professor,
attraction.
Let
Nothing
me
more.
be your pet student again. Tell me the thesis
Did
so
you,
that I may apply your knowledge as you go on.
Did you come to look
At
for the
present, I am
treasure?
going in my
Treasure?
mind from point to point as a
Signore,
madman,
please.
and
Oh,
not a
you don't
sane
think
one
there
who
is a
follows an
treasure?
idea.
I would
I
be
feel like
very
a novice
surprised.
lumbering through
Then
a
how
bog
come you
and a
took the
mist,
tour?
jumping
Well,
from one
the
tussocks
history
to
of the
another in
area
mere blind
and the
effort to
fable
move
of the
on
treasure.
without knowing
These
where I am
interest
going.
one, no?
No.
That
Not
is good
really.
image, he said.
Then
Well,
why
I shall
are
tell
you
you.
here?
My
Oh,
thesis is
yeah. The
this. I
history,
want
sure.
you to believe. To believe what?
Do you know
To
anything about the
believe
Holy
in
Grail
things that
being
you
around
cannot.
here?
The Grail
Let
is a
me
story.
illustrate.
Nothing more.
I heard once of an American who so defined faith, that faculty which enables us to believe
He
things
looks like a math
which we
teacher
know
I had
to
once,
be
which
untrue.
explains why I never liked
For
math.
one, I follow that man. He meant that we shall have an open mind and not let a little bit of truth check the rush of a big truth.
Hey,
Like a
how
small
are
rock
you? The
does a
name's
railway
Knight.
truck.
Good
We get the
afternoon,
small
Mr.
truth
Knight.
first.
Are you the
Good.
priest here,
We
or
keep him
People
and we
call
value
me
him,
the Abbé,
but all the
yes.
same, we
The
must not
names
let him
are
think
no.
himself
Abbé
all the
are
truth
no.
in the universe. Then you want me
This
not
is
to let
quite
some
a
previous
place.
conviction injure
I
the
haven't seen
receptivity
many
of my mind
churches
with
this,
regard to some strange matter. Do I read your lesson
colorful.
aright?
I assure you, it is
You
unique.
are my favorite
Saint
people
Mary
still.
Magdalene's is
It is
quite
worth to
ancient,
teach you.
but Abbé
Now that you
Saunier
are willing to
restored it in
understand,
the
you have taken the first
1890s.
step to
It is
understand.
his
You
spirit
think
you
then
see around
that
you.
those so small hole in the children's throats were made by the
Nice.
same that made the hole in Miss Lucy?
you don't
I
see
suppose
churches
so.
dedicated to Mary
He stood
Magdalene
up
very
and said
often?
solemnly,
Ah, but the Magdalene cult was
you
quite
are
strong in the
wrong.
old days, particularly in this
would
part
it were
of the
so.
world.
But alas,
oh, yeah?
no.
Why's that?
It is worse.
The Magdalene
Far,
journeyed to the south
far
of France
worse.
after the death of Jesus.
God's name,
She
Professor
lived
Van
here for
Helsing.
many
What do
years.
you mean?
In
I
fact,
cried.
you can visit
He
her
threw
remains
himself with
at
a
a
despairing
church near
gesture into a
Marseille.
chair
Ah,
and placed his
I had
elbows
no
on the table,
idea.
covering his face with his hands as he spoke. They
What do you
were
mean by the
made
Magdalene
by
cult?
Miss Lucy.
A cult of devotion. It's still quite strong in this area,
Oh, that
despite the
concludes
best
chapter
efforts of the
14.
Catholic Church. Did you
Okay,
know that
tomorrow,
most of the
I think we're
famous
gonna have
Black
another great
Madonna
cliffhanger.
images were not
Oh my
images
goodness,
of
I
the
want to see what's
Virgin
going to happen
Mary
in
at
tomorrow's
all,
chapter. But
but
again,
of
gotta
the
wait,
Magdalene.
gotta wait, gotta wait.
The church wanted
Thank
to
you for joining me
downplay the
today
role
for
of
our
Mary
chapter
Magdalene.
of
So they called
Dracula.
her
We
a
will
prostitute
conclude
and
tomorrow.
insisted that
Tomorrow will be our
all the
last
Black
Friday reading
Madonnas
for a
were
while.
really the
And then
Virgin
we'll
Mary.
go, starting next week, we're just going to do the live streams Monday through Thursday. So thank you very
But
much.
the
I am
Black
grateful that we have
Madonnas
another
usually
Friday
show
to
a
read
mother and
because
child, don't
I don't know if
they?
I could wait
If
until
the
Monday.
woman's Mary Magdalene, who's the child?
I will
Excellent
see you,
question, Mr.
I will
Knight.
see you tomorrow again, I hope. And
Do you know much
until then,
about the
I hope you have a great
Templars?
rest of your day.
I know the
hope you
basic
find
history.
some wonderful books to read.
There are a
have
few
some great
Templars
conversation with
buried
friends,
in
and
the
maybe
cemetery.
the Padres will actually win tonight. Yay!
But,
Let's hope. I'll see you guys
yes.
soon.
I
Take
think
care.
I refer
Bye.
you to a young scholar staying in the house near the Chateau de
Hi
Blanchefort.
everyone, welcome back.
His
I'm
name
Christina,
is
the manager
Larry
of the Pacific Beach
Chester.
Library, and thank
He
you for
says
joining me
he's
today for
working
day
on a Templar
14 of our read-along
Okay,
together
thanks.
of
And let me know
Dracula
if he's
by Bram
helpful at
Stoker.
all, will you?
Sure.
Today, I realized that I forgot
The
to put
Holy
my water
Grail
into
has
my
been
tea,
linked
so
to
it's
this
just starting to
area, is
steep.
that
So we're going to
right?
talk a little bit
The
about other
connection
things
is
first
nearly
while
as
the tea
old as the
steeps.
Grail
In
legend
fact, I'm
itself.
going to start with something
What have
totally
you
not
read
related
on
to
the
our read aloud at all.
Not
but it's
much.
baseball postseason, and I really like
Arthurian
baseball, so I'm just
legends
going to
aren't
say
really my thing. But it's supposed to be a cup that contained the blood of Christ, isn't it?
A vessel that contains the blood of Christ, yes.
Do you think the Holy Grail is behind the treasure of Rennes-le-Château?
It is possible.
Do you know of anyone in this area that has a particular interest in the Grail?
Besides myself? No one that I
Expecting,
can
but I
think
think we're
of.
still live and it's
Of
working,
course,
so
the
let's
treasure
keep going.
seekers who visit the
Today's
valley
tea
are
is-
often interested in the Grail.
Welcome back, friends. I'm Christina, the manager of the Pacific
you
Beach
think
Library. Thank you for
that
joining me
there's a
for day
treasure around
15
here?
of our read-along
Of course
together
there's a
of
treasure, but it will not be found by
Dracula
just
Bram
anyone.
Stoker.
Let
Today
those who have
is our last
ears
Friday reading
hear.
for a while, and
Right.
I'm excited to get into it. We had a wonderful, wonderful
They
cliffhanger
got
yesterday.
brochures, but they're in French.
Oh, sorry. It's like
I
the
don't
screen
wanna
read.
wear
I don't
out
know.
my
It just
welcome.
did something I wasn't expecting, but I think we're still live and it's working. So let's keep going.
You got any of
Today's
these in
tea is
English?
the berry
Not at
blossom.
the
I decided to go back
moment,
to
but I
the
have
bloody
some on
looking
order.
teas.
If Monsieur
Because we're
would
getting
check
to
back
a stage of
tomorrow.
the story where Lucy
Sure.
Westenra, we're pretty sure, has become a vampire and is sucking the blood off innocent children. Ooh. She was such a nice girl.
Saint Anthony the
So,
Hermit. There's
Yeah,
a
in honor of
fun-loving
Lucy
guy.
and her transition to vampirism,
Saint Germain.
today we have a nice
Never heard
berry
of her.
blossom.
Maybe she's
Which
the saint
is
of
oh
relativity.
so sweet, but looks
Get
oh
it?
so bloody.
Germain. Relative. Oh, never mind.
If there's something great you're having today, please go ahead and comment and share. I always love getting
Mary
good ideas.
Magdalene.
I was talking with
What
somebody
a
the other day who
babe,
mentioned she
huh?
likes smoky teas, and I was like, I don't know what a smoky tea
Saint
is. I'm kind of
Roach.
excited. I'm gonna have to
Nice
try a
legs.
smoky tea
Maybe
later
he's
on
the
and see what
patron
that's all
saint
about.
of Gillette.
Let's see.
Never mind.
Oh wow, we are getting pretty far along in our book. Wow, that's great. Actually, yeah,
It's
come to think of
Jesus
it,
and John
there's
the
27
Baptist.
chapters in
They
this.
look dusty.
And we are already at chapter 15. We're more than halfway.
That's
Oh
a
my goodness.
confessional, but it looks like
This
it
book
hasn't
is
been
so
used
quick.
since Vatican II.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit
I
about
don't
yesterday. We
think
read
they're
chapter
still
14.
taking customers.
Chapter 14 began with some diary entries by Mina Harker in her
Uccelli
journal.
says it means
And
by
basically,
this
it started out
sign
with her
you shall
talking about her
conquer it.
husband. She's
Wonder
worried
how
about
he
him.
knows.
She has reached the point where she feels she needs to
Nothing
look
like a
back
little
at the journal
satanic
he kept
imagery
while
to
he
make a
was in
church feel
Transylvania.
cozy.
And she's concerned. And then when she does read
What
it,
are they looking
she
for?
is
The
again
last
more
virgin in
concerned because she's
France?
like, this is so fabulous, and in the sense of it's so strange and unusual. Can it possibly be true, or is this the brain fever was already infecting him that he, wasn't aware of what was going on? However, it's interspersed with letters from Dr. Van Helsing, who contacts Mina because he is, researching what happened to Lucy Westenra. He's trying to piece together how she became a vampire, basically, how she became embroiled in, with Count Dracula. And so he reads through these letters and he sees that Lucy had mentioned that Mina Murray at the time was staying with her, and that she had observed her, walking in the cemetery that night, and perhaps Mina might be able to shed some light on this. So when he contacts her, and she's like, "Oh yeah, of
All
course,
right, you
come on and meet with
hairball.
me."
What
And
are
when
you
he meets with
really
her, she
doing
gives
here?
him
You didn't
a
know
copy of
anything about my
Lucy's,
trip.
I'll tell
of
you.
her diary that
Don't
she kept
worry about
detailing
it.
the time
What
of
about
Lucy and
you?
experiences.
Since
And he's
when do
quite
you take
impressed,
European
by
tours?
her notes.
Hey, You don't know everything
She
about me.
also,
Apparently
in
not.
this meeting
Anyway,
with him,
I was here
he is
first.
so impressed
So
by
what's your
her
excuse?
and her, you know, what she has, the notes that she has
Have
taken,
you heard a
her
baby crying
keen
since you've arrived?
observation,
A
her
baby?
intelligence.
What the hell
And
are
he
you
says
talking
basically,
about,
if
Nat?
there's ever
I
any
ain't
favor
heard
I
no
could do
baby.
for you, I would. And she basically
All right.
breaks down and
This
she
is what
says,
happened.
you could help
A
me
couple
with
of
my
weeks
husband.
ago, Grace and I
He's
got
had
this
some
invitation in
experience.
the mail.
Please look this over. Read over this journal of my
I was
husband's
passed
also,
out for a while.
which I've
I'm
also
not even sure how long.
transcribed from
When
the
I got up,
from the shorthand
we were
and
at the
typed out.
Coolisa
And
station.
so I have this
The
written document.
conductor
Please
saw
look it
the
over and
two
tell me your
men
thoughts
get
on
off.
that as well.
They've got
So
to
he
be
reads
around
over
here
Jonathan's,
somewhere.
Wow.
So then he reads
This
over
is
her
really
notes about
interesting.
Lucy as well as Jonathan's
I'm
notes about his
glad
time in
you
Transylvania.
appreciate it.
And basically,
So what's all this
Dr.
about?
Van Helsing lets her know that
Or did I hear something funny?
Nothing funny about it.
your husband's
The
diary
night
is
visitor
very
Springs
strange,
James calls them,
but it
they
is
take
true.
blood.
If doubt is
Sounds
what
like
plagued him, if
vampires
doubt
to
was the
me.
thing that made him
Oh,
question his
you don't
sanity
believe in that
and his
crap, do you?
remembrances, then you
Mose,
need doubt no
you
more
have
because
no
these things are
idea.
true,
Well, the
and I will talk about
kidnappers
it
are
more when
real.
I see you.
So what are you
She's
gonna
very
do?
reassured.
I'm gonna
She then
figure out
sends her
what's
husband
going
to meet
on,
with
that's
Dr. Van
what.
Helsing, and then we
First
get
of
another
all,
entry from
there's your
Jonathan
tour
Harper's
group.
journal.
I
And he
think you're
begins by
swinging
saying,
at
I
an
never
empty
thought
plate
I'd
there.
write a journal again,
Y'all
but
got
here I
in
am
last
because I
night,
realized
didn't
now that I
you?
was not insane.
Maybe one of you was
And
on
that
that
Dr. Van
train.
Helsing is
Or
saying that,
maybe
this
someone
sounds
in
plausible.
your little group is here for a
He's saying there's
handoff
some
of the
connection
kid.
with the count. He's like, I
It'd be
can't
the
really tell you
perfect
too many
cover
details now,
story.
but we will discuss it later.
You're right.
And then as Dr.
It's
Van Helsing
possible.
is getting ready to
Or
return
maybe
to
not.
London, he
Which
looks
is
at
why
a
I gotta
newspaper
go
that
check
Jonathan
out the
Harper
area,
gives him.
too,
And in it he
soon as
sees
I
the
get some
account for the
wheels.
Westminster Gazette.
So this is a real
the one that we had
shot-egg
ended
case,
chapter
huh?
13
What's
with,
going on with
about
that
the
whole
Bloofer
thing?
lady.
And
when
what
he
about
sees
Grace?
I'll
that,
tell
he
you.
realizes that
Don't
the
rush
Bloofer
me.
lady is the beautiful lady, which is Lucy Westenra. And so the chapter then continues in the voice of Dr. Seward from his diary. And in it, Dr. Seward had also said, I plan on never continuing my diary again, but now he's back. Because the story of Lucy Westenra continues. He talks with Dr. Van Helsing.
What are you doing?
Oh, nothing.
They say how, like, Dr. Van Helsing shows him this article, and he basically says, look at this thing, the children have the marks
Gracie's
on the neck
doing
very
fine
similar to what
since you
Lucy
asked.
suffered from.
Bet.
And could
Huh?
it be the same thing?
Huh?
Well, let's
Come on.
discuss it. Let's
The
think
two
about
of
it.
you alone
And
in the
basically,
house.
Dr. Van Helsing
We're
spends a
not
couple pages
sleeping
talking
together.
with Dr. Seward
What?
about
Did he get
about
chewed off in
science
your last case or
and
what?
also about
Oh,
belief
I don't know.
and
We've come close a couple of
and
times,
it's
but
just
I
basically
get all
this idea of how
freaked
these
out
things
or
that we
something.
once thought
You're starting to
unbelievable,
worry, bud.
impossible in fact.
Gracie's a doll. But
Some
she's
of them now,
living
through
with
the,
me.
through the glories of
If I
science,
slept
we
with her
believe
and
them
then
to
I
be true.
changed my mind,
We
what would I
credit them
do?
as
Throw
possible.
her
We
out?
credit them as
Why
not
don't
only
you just
plausible,
marry
but
her, Nat?
as definite
Oh,
things that we, of course, there's proof
I
for it, so we
forgot.
know it must be true.
You're allergic.
But these are things
Even
that
if
we
I
once,
did
maybe
wanna
even
get
not very
married,
long ago,
I'm
thought
not
were
sure it would
absolutely
be
incredible or
Gracie.
just the realm of dreams and fantasy.
She's like a chair, you know?
And he mentions
Say
many
you
things
see this
that
really
Dr.
great
Seward's
chair.
like, no, of course,
And you
not,
like
of
the
course not, of
chair,
course not.
and
then he
your
gets
mother
something that
likes
Dr.
the
Seward's like,
chair,
oh, yeah,
and everyone says
that.
you should buy the
And
chair.
Dr. Van Helsing's
But you know
argument
that
is
if you
that
take it home,
the
everything
things
else
that
would
you
have to
thought
go.
was not
You know,
possible,
like the chair is
eventually
Louis
you
the
do.
14th, and the rest
You
of your
find
place is
a way to believe it
IKEA.
because other
Well,
men have said
bud,
it is so, and they've
I
found
hate to
ways to
say
show it
it,
to be
but
so.
you better start cooking or get out of the
Open
kitchen.
your mind to the
'Cause you
things
keep
that
farting
seem
around,
to you at
and
this
somebody
point to still
might
be
just
incredible
bait
and to be
you to it.
impossible. And once you open your mind to that possibility,
About this
you will see
Schottenjäger
new
thing.
possibilities.
You know, we had
And
that
so,
big case
and
last year.
basically what he ends
Yeah,
the
I
chapter
seen
with
your
is
book,
saying,
The Brutal Beast.
do you think,
God, what a
you know,
sick
what is
freaking
what has
man you
happened,
got.
you know, with these
Yeah.
these marks?
Anyway,
Like, do you
since
think that
then,
they were
Grace
made
and
by the
Gerda
same
have
creature
been
that
getting
put the
all
holes into Miss
organized
Lucy?
on me.
And
Gracie even
Dr.
did this
Seward
computer
is now
program
like, you
called
know,
Sydney.
I think you might be
supposed
right.
to
I
help
think
when
that
we're
would
in
be
the
it.
field.
And Dr. Van Helsing is
Of
like,
course, I'll never use
no,
it, but I can't tell her.
you're wrong. It's not the
Uh-huh.
same thing. It is,
And
in
I
fact,
noticed
it's
you're
even
looking a
worse.
little
And he's like, well, what could it be?
toned
What could be worse
Huh?
than that same
Yeah,
creature that attacked
I've been
and killed
working
beautiful
out.
Lucy Westenra? Now
Grace
it's
says I
the
need to be
children.
in
What
shape
could be
to
worse
chase
than
the
that?
bad guys.
And Dr. Van
I
Helsing
point to
reveals
you
that
as
it's
an
worse
example
because because
in the
those
contrary.
marks of the children
Then
were
she
made
points
by
out
Lucy
that you
herself.
never get the bad guys.
Okay.
Oh,
So now we get to
ha.
continue with chapter 15, the denouement,
Glad to see you
where
haven't lost
has
your
been made that
butt
Lucy
stupid
Westenra
sense of
is
humor.
indeed now
So,
the attacker.
did you ever
We'll
find
find out
out
more about
how
if
your
Dr.
family
Seward
got
believes
into
it, and
this
more about
whole
how
thing in
Dr.
the
Van
first
Helsing
place?
explains its
No,
possibility.
the journals go way back to 900 AD, and it looks like it was
All right,
an old family
let's see what
tradition
happens
even
in
then.
chapter 15
I don't know.
of
Grace found a few
Dracula.
other groups
All
of
right,
shadow
Dr.
hunters, and they
Seward's
seem pretty
diary
decent.
continued.
There's a whole
For
ashram
a
in India
while,
where they
sheer
train monks
anger
for this kind
mastered
of
me.
thing.
It
Grace
was
has
as
been
if he
bugging
had,
me
during
about
her
going.
life,
Why
struck
don't
Lucy
you?
on the face.
Shit.
I smote
I'm
the
not a
table
Lost
hard and
Horizons
rose up as
kinda
I said to
guy.
him,
I see what you
Dr.
mean.
Van Helsing, are you
Well,
mad?
no point getting
He
all
raised his
serious
head
about
and
it.
looked at me,
Screw
and somehow
you,
the tenderness
mostly.
of his face calmed me at once. Would
So,
I were, he
how'd you
said.
find out about
Madness
this tour
were easy to
anyway?
bear.
I read
compared
about
to
it
truth
in a
like
travel
this.
magazine.
Oh,
A
my
travel
friend.
magazine?
Why, think
Since
you,
when do
did
you
I
read
go so far
travel
round?
magazines?
Why take
What?
so long
Like
to
you're the
tell
only
you
one
so
that can
simple
go
a
running
thing?
off to Europe?
Was it because I
I'm
hate
pretty
you and have hated
cosmopolitan
you all my
myself,
life?
you know.
Was it because I wished to give you pain?
Cosmopolitan is more like
Was it that I wanted, now so late, revenge for
Why
that
don't you go
time
write
when you
some
saved my
dialogue,
life
smart
and from a
ass?
fearful
Get
death?
it out of your system.
Ah, no. Forgive
So,
me,
what
said
about
I.
the treasure of
He
Rennes
went
le
on.
Chateau? You
My
have a
friend,
theory?
Not
it was
really.
because I
Madeline
wished to be
says
gentle in the
everybody
breaking
has a
to you,
theory.
for I
Oh,
know
that
you have
Madeline.
loved that so sweet lady.
What a babe.
But even
Huh?
yet, I do not expect you to believe.
Yeah.
It is so hard to accept at once
Wait
any
a minute.
abstract truth
You never said
that
what
we
you
may
think
doubt
about the
such
treasure.
to be
Is that
possible
why you
when we have always
came
believed the
to
no of it. It is
find
more
the
hard still to
treasure?
accept
I don't
so
know about
sad a
that.
concrete
Find
truth.
out about
and
it,
such
maybe.
A one as
Sure.
Miss Lucy.
It seemed like
Tonight,
lark.
I go
But
to
what
prove
do
it.
Speaking
you...
of
Dare you
Madeline,
come with
now,
me?
don't you just
This
love
staggered
that kind
me.
of tough girl
A man
thing
does
she
not
got
like to
going?
prove such a
I
truth.
wasn't
Byron
speaking about
accepted from the
Madeline. I was
category
talking about
jealousy.
the treasure.
Oh,
And proved
Nice area,
the very
though, ain't it?
truth he most abhorred.
Now,
He saw
you
my
didn't see the
hesitation and
kidnappers
spoke.
in the area
The
last
logic
night,
is
did
simple.
you?
No madman's logic this
the
time.
guys you saw on the
jumping
train
from
both
tussock
had
to
long
tussock in a
hair
misty
pulled
bog.
back in ponytails.
If it be
and
not
they had
true,
this
then
trunk
proof will be
with air
relief.
holes.
At worst,
Nope.
it will not
Haven't
harm.
seen anything like that since I
If
got
it
here.
be true.
Mose,
there is
do you
the
know
dread.
anything about the
Yet
Holy
every dread
Grail?
should help
Holy
my
Grail?
cause, for it
No.
is in some need
Not
of
really.
relief.
Why?
Come, I tell
What
you
do
what
you
I
know
propose.
about the Holy Grail?
First, that we go
Me?
off now and
Not
see that
much.
child in the hospital. Dr. Vincent of the North Hospital, where the papers say the child is,
I'm gonna
is
take
friend of
off. You
mine,
wanna look
and I
around with
think
me
of
this
yours
afternoon?
since you were in
This
class in
afternoon?
Amsterdam. He will
Nah.
let two scientists
I got
see
some
his
things
case
to do.
if
What
he
good
will
do you
not
have
let
to
two
do?
friends.
You're on
We
vacation.
shall tell him nothing,
I
but
brought
only that we
some
wish
work
to
with me.
learn.
Yeah,
And then-
you know, a cop's work is never
And then
done.
Never
he took a key
started
from his
even.
pocket and held it up.
Oh,
And
by the
then
way,
we spend
would
the
you
night,
mind
you and
not
I, in the churchyard
mentioning
where
to
Lucy
anyone
lies.
that I'm a cop?
This
What?
is the
People
key
just get
that locked
kind
the
of
tomb.
weird. You know,
I
I want
had
to
it
be
from the
an
coffin
average
man
Joe
to
for
give to
once.
Arthur.
Come
My
on.
heart sank within
Mose,
me, for I
I've
felt
got
that there was some
news for
fearful
you.
ordeal
You
before
can't
us.
get any
I
more
could do nothing, however, so I plucked up what
Nat.
heart I could
All
and
right,
said that we had
all
better
right.
hasten as the
Mum's the
afternoon was
word.
passing.
Thanks. See you
We
around?
found the child
Yeah.
awake. It had had a sleep and
See
taken
ya.
some food, and altogether was going on well. Dr. Vincent took the bandage from its throat and showed us the punctures. There was no mistaking the similarity to those which had been on Lucy's throat. They were smaller, and the edges looked fresher. That was all. We asked Vincent to what he attributed them, and he replied that it must have been a bite of some animal, perhaps a rat, but for his own part he was inclined to think it was one of the bats, which are so numerous on the northern heights of London. Out of so many harmless ones, he said, there may be some wild specimen from the south of a more malignant species. Some sailor may have brought one home and it managed to escape, or even from the zoological gardens a young one may have got loose, or one be bred there from a vampire. These things do occur, you know. Only 10 days ago a wolf got out, and
What a
was, I believe,
pathetic
traced
excuse
up
for
in
a
this
bat.
direction. For a week after, the children were playing nothing
Nice,
but
man.
Red Riding Hood on the heath, and
I
in every
need
alley
to
in the
rent
place,
a bike.
until this Bloofer lady scare came
Oh,
along,
check out that
since when it has been
wow,
quite a
I'd
gala
love to
time
drive
with
that
them.
baby.
Even this poor little mite, when he woke up today, asked the nurse if he might go away.
Hey, man.
When she asked him why he wanted to go, he said he wanted to play with the Bloofer lady.
Hey, how you doing? I want to rent a
hope,
bike.
said Van Helsing, that when you
Your
are sending the
passport,
child
please.
home, you will caution its parents to keep
Fix him
strict
more so
watch
I can
over
learn
it.
something out of him.
These fancies to stray are most dangerous, and if the child were to remain out another night, it
Monsieur
would probably
Knight.
be fatal.
You are not
But
with
in
the
any
tour
case,
group?
I suppose you will
I
not
do
let
not
it
see you
away
on my
for some
list.
days?
Nope.
Certainly
I'm on my
not.
own.
Not for a week
I
at
am
least.
sorry, monsieur,
Longer
but most
if the
of
wound
my
is not
fleet is
healed.
reserved for the
Our
tour
visit to
group.
the hospital
What?
took more time than we
I
had
have
reckoned on,
one
and the
little
sun had
bike left,
dipped
monsieur,
before
but
we came out.
she is nothing
When
grand.
Van Helsing
I
saw
show
how
you.
dark it was, he
Here
said,
she is.
"There
This
is not
piece of
hurry.
crap? Oh,
It is
come
more late
on.
than I thought."
I was
Come,
kind of hoping
let
for
us
this,
seek
baby.
somewhere that we may eat,
Ooh,
and then
what
we
is
shall
this, a
go on our way.
WW2 Army issue?
We dined in
Oui,
Jack Straw's
but the
castle,
tour group
along with a little
reservations
crowd
were
of
made first.
bicyclists and others who
It
were
is
genially
this
noisy.
little bike, monsieur,
About 10
or
o'clock we
nothing?
started from the inn.
Well,
It
who
was
gets
then
the
very dark,
Harley?
and the
Whoever
scattered
chooses
lamps
it
made the
first,
darkness
monsieur.
greater when
If
we were
none of
once
the
outside
others
their individual
want
radius.
the large bike,
The professor
you
had
have it.
evidently noted
Oh,
the road we
yeah,
were to go,
well, that's
for he
gonna
went on
happen.
unhesitatingly.
Let me know what you decide.
But as for me, I was in quite a mix-up as to locality. As we went further, we met fewer and fewer people, till at last we were somewhat surprised when we met even the patrol of horse police going their usual suburban round. At last we watched the wall of the... At last we reached the wall of the churchyard, which we climbed over. With some little difficulty, for it was very dark and the whole place seemed so strange to us, we found the Westenra tomb. The professor took the key, opened the creaky door, and standing back, politely, but quite unconsciously, motioned
I
me
noticed
to
y'all
precede
moving
him.
suitcases
There
around
was a
upstairs.
delicious
Was there a
irony
problem
in the
with your
offer,
room?
in the
Oh,
courtliness of
my,
giving preference
yes.
on such a
But that wasn't
ghastly
why we
occasion.
moved, Lily.
My companion followed me quickly, and
Mr.
cautiously
Barza
drew the
kindly
door
offered to
after
exchange
carefully
with us.
ascertaining that the lock was a falling
He's a
and not a spring
Muslim, you
one.
see.
In the
Wanting to
latter
be
case,
facing
I should have
east
been
and
in
all
a bad
that.
plight.
Well,
Then he fumbled in his
Esther and
bag,
I are
and
very
taking
much
out a
in favour of
matchbox and a
supporting
piece
the
of candle,
cultural differences
proceeded to
between
make a
us,
light.
aren't we, darling?
The tomb in the
Yes,
daytime,
Lily.
and when wreathed
And it's a
with
much
fresh
nicer
flowers,
room.
had looked grim
It's
and
larger
gruesome enough.
and has a balcony.
Now,
Of course,
some
I
days
do
afterward, when
appreciate the
flowers hung
sacrifice.
lank and dead,
But then there are two of
their
us
whites
and only
turning to
one
rust
of
and their
Mr.
greens to
Barza.
browns,
And I'm
when
sure
the
he's used
spider
to
and the
stuffier
beetle had
quarters.
resumed their
Middle
accustomed
Easterners so
dominance,
often are,
when
you
time
see.
discolored stone and
Yeah,
dust encrusted
I've,
mortar and
heard
rank
that.
and rusty dank iron and tarnished brass and clouded silver plating gave back the feeble glimmer of a candle. The effect was more miserable and sordid than could have been imagined.
Hey,
It conveyed
free
irresistibly
food.
the idea that life, animal life, was not the only thing which could pass away. Van Helsing went about his work systematically, holding his candle so that he could read the coffin plates, and so holding it that the sperm dropped in white patches which congealed as they touched the metal. He made assurance of Lucy's coffin. Another
Now
search
what
in
is
his
it,
bag,
Matt?
and he took out a turn screw. What are you going to do?
Say,
I asked.
you got a passport,
To open the
Mose?
coffin.
Right here,
You shall yet be
doofus.
convinced.
Why?
Oh, just want to make sure
Straightway,
you keep
he
it
began
on you.
taking out
You
the
know what they
screws,
say about
and
hotel
finally
rooms in
lifted off
Europe.
the lid,
No.
showing the casing
What do they
of
say?
lead beneath. The sight
Don't
was
leave your
almost
passports
too much
in
for
them.
me.
Right.
It seemed to me
Well,
it
Maddie
seemed
already
to be
told
as
us
much
to
an
keep
affront
them
to the
handy,
dead
but
as it would have been to have
thanks
stripped
so
off her clothing and her
much for
sleep
your
whilst living.
concern.
I actually took hold of his hand to stop him. He only said,
That jacket
"We
is
shall
about as
see."
moozly as
And
you can
again,
get.
fumbling in his bag, took out a tiny fret
Color
saw.
me paranoid,
Striking
but I
the
think
turn
he'd
screw
get a
through
bit
the lead with
suspicious
the
if I
swift
took it in
downward
front of him.
stab, which made me wince. He made a
See
small
ya.
hole,
Yeah,
which was, however,
get
big
outta
enough
here, you
to admit the point
wanker.
of the saw. I had expected a rush of gas from the weak old corpse. We doctors who have had to study our dangers have to become accustomed to such things, and I drew back towards the door. But the professor never stopped for a moment. He sawed down a couple of feet along one side of the lead coffin, and then across, and down the other side. Taking the edge of the loose flange, he bent it back towards the foot of the coffin, and holding up the candle into the aperture, motioned to me to look. I drew near and looked. The coffin was empty. It was certainly a surprise to me, and gave me a considerable shock, but Van Helsing was unmoved. He was now more sure than ever of his ground, and so emboldened to proceed in his task. "Are you satisfied now, friend John?" he asked. I felt all the dogged argumentativeness of my nature awake within me as I answered him. "Am I satisfied that Lucy's body is not in that coffin? But that only proves one thing." "And what is that, friend John?" "That it is not there." "That is good logic," he said, "so far as it goes. But how can you account for it not being there?" "Perhaps a body snatcher," I suggested. "Some of the Undertaker's people may have stolen it." I felt that I was speaking folly, and yet it was the only real cause which I could suggest. The professor sighed. "Ah, well," he said, "we must have more proof. Come with me." He put on the coffin lid again, gathered up all his things, and placed them in the bag. blew out the light, and placed the candle also in the bag. We opened the door and went out. Behind us, he closed the door and locked it. He handed me the key, saying, Will you keep it? You had better be assured. I laughed. It was not a very cheerful laugh, I am bound to say, as I motioned him to keep it. The key is nothing, I said. There may be duplicates, and anyhow it is not difficult to pick a lock of that kind. He said nothing, but put the key in his pocket. Then he told me to watch at one side of the churchyard, whilst he would watch at the other. I took up my place behind a yew tree, and I saw his dark figure move until the intervening headstones and trees hid it from my sight.
Returns.
It was a lonely vigil. Just after I had taken my place, I heard a distant clock strike 12, and in time came 1 and 2. I was chilled and unnerved, and angry with the professor for taking me on such an errand, and with myself for coming. I was too cold and too sleepy to be keenly observant, and not sleepy enough to betray my trust. So altogether, I had a dreary, miserable time. Suddenly, as I turned round, I thought I saw something like a white streak moving between 2 dark yew trees at the side of the churchyard, farthest from the tomb. At the same time, a dark mass moved from the professor's side of the ground and hurriedly went towards it. Then I too moved, but I had to go round headstones on railed-off tombs, and I stumbled over graves. The sky was overcast, and somewhere far off an early cock crew. A little way off, beyond a line of scattered juniper trees which marked the pathway to the church, a white, dim figure
Looks like
flitted in the
Arno
direction
has
of
a
the tomb.
green thumb.
The tomb itself was hidden by trees, and I could not see where the figure had disappeared. I heard the rustle of actual movement where I had first seen the white figure, and coming over, found the professor holding in his arms a tiny child. When he saw me, he held it out to me and said, "Are you satisfied now?" "No," I said, in a way that I felt was aggressive. "Do you not see the child?" "Yes, it is a child, but who brought it here? And is it wounded?" I asked. "We shall see,"
A
said
black
the professor,
cat.
and with one impulse
How
we took our way out of the
appropriate.
churchyard, he carrying the sleeping child.
That cat's
When we had got
some
some
major
distance
black
away,
fur
we
down
went
it.
into a clump of trees
I
and
might
struck
be
a
able
match
to use
and
some
looked
of
at the
that.
child's throat. It was without a scratch or scar of any kind. "Was I right?" I asked triumphantly. "We were just in time," said the professor thankfully. We had now to decide what we were to do with the child, and so consulted about it. If we were to take it to
You
a
try to
police
share
station,
a
we should
little
have to give
human
some account of our
kindness,
movements
and
during the
what
night.
does it
At
get
least
you?
we should have had to make some statement as to how we had come to find the child. So finally we decided that we would take it to the heath, and when we heard a policeman coming, would leave it where he could not fail to find it. We would then seek our way home as quickly as we could. All fell out well. At the edge of Hampstead Heath we heard a policeman's heavy tramp, and laying the child on the pathway, we waited and watched until he saw it as he flashed his lantern to and fro. We heard his exclamation of
I kinda
astonishment,
like
and then we
that
went away
squeezing
silently.
through the hole bit.
By good chance, we
I
got
wonder
a
if I
cab
could
near
get
the
him to do it
Spaniards and
again.
drove to town. I cannot sleep, so I made this entry, but I must try to get a few hours' sleep, as Van Helsing is to call for me at noon. He insists that I go with him on another expedition. 27 September. It was 2 o'clock before we found a suitable opportunity for our attempt. The funeral held at noon was all completed, and the last stragglers of the mourners had taken themselves lazily away, when, looking carefully from behind a clump of alder trees, we saw the sexton lock the gate after him. We knew that we were safe till morning, did we desire it, but the professor told me that we should not want more than an hour at most. Again, I felt that horrid sense of the reality of things, in which any effort of imagination seemed out of place, and I realized distinctly the perils of the law which we were incurring in our unhallowed work. Besides, I felt it was all so useless. Outrageous as it was to open a leaden coffin to see if a woman dead nearly a week were really dead, it now seemed the height of folly to open the tomb again, when we knew from the evidence of our own eyesight that the coffin was empty. I shrugged my shoulders,
Mosley's
however,
passport.
and rested silently. For
Unfortunately,
Van
I
Helsing
don't
had a
look
way
a
of
thing
going on
like
his
him.
own road,
That is,
no
it's
matter who
fortunate most of the
remonstrated.
time, but it's
He
less
took the
than
key,
ideal at
opened
the
the
moment.
vault, and again courteously motioned
Some
me
people
to
think
proceed.
I give America a bad name.
The place was not so gruesome as last night, but oh, how unutterably mean-looking when the sunshine streamed in. Van Helsing walked over to Lucy's coffin, and I followed. He bent over and again forced back the leaden flange, and a shock of surprise and dismay shot through me.
If I really want to do a Mosley
There
look,
lay Lucy,
I'm going to have to put some
seemingly
stuff with
just
it.
as we had seen her the night before her funeral. She was, if possible,
It's close,
more
but I gotta
radiantly
do
beautiful
something
than
about
ever,
the
and I
dew.
could not believe that she was dead. The lips were red, nay, redder than before, and on the cheeks was a delicate bloom. "Is this a juggle?" I said to him. "Are you convinced now?" said the professor in response, and as he spoke he put over his hand, and in a way that made me shudder, pulled back the dead lips and showed the white teeth. "See,"
Somebody
he went
lost a
on,
hat.
"they are even sharper than before. With this and this," and he touched one of the canine teeth and that below it, "the little children can be bitten. Are you of belief now, friend John?"
Now
Once more
that's
argumentative
a Mosley
hostility
outfit.
woke within me. I could not accept such an overwhelming idea as he suggested. So with an attempt to argue, of which I was even at the moment ashamed, I said, "She may have been placed here since last night." "Indeed, that is so? And by whom?" "I do not know. Someone has done it." "And yet she has been dead 1 week. Most
No
peoples in that
peeking.
time would not look so." I had no answer for this, so was silent. Van Helsing did not seem to notice my silence. At any rate, he showed neither chagrin nor triumph. He was looking intently at the face of the dead
Hey,
woman, raising
is
the
this
eyelids
where
and looking at
y'all
the
rent
eyes, and once more
mopeds?
opening the lips
Oui.
and examining the
May I
teeth.
see your passport?
Then he turned to me and said, "Here, there is one thing which is different from all recorded. Here is some
Monsieur
dual life
Mosley.
that
Yes,
is
I
not
have a
as
reservation
common.
for you. One moment.
She was bitten by the vampire when she was in a trance, sleepwalking." "Oh, you start. You do not know that, friend John, but you shall know
You
it
may
all
have
later.
any bike
all
in
later.
the lot, monsieur.
And in
I
trance
can.
could be best
Heck,
come to
I
take
guess
more
I'll
blood.
take this big old hog
In
hair.
trance,
How
she
much
died,
is that?
And in
100
trance,
francs a
she is
day.
undead too.
Looks like we
So
got
it is
us
that
a
she differed
deal.
from the other.
There you are, monsieur.
Usually
You
when
pay
the
when you
undead
return the
sleep at
bike.
home, as
Golly,
he spoke, he made a comprehensive
thanks.
sweep of his arm to designate what
But
to a
wait,
vampire was home.
the toll group gets
Their
my
faces show
special
what they
treasure
are.
chest
But
package.
this so
You get
sweet,
the
that was when
binoculars
she
and
was-
the shovel with
Excuse me.
that.
But
Oh,
this so sweet
great.
that was when she not undead, she go
Best
back
of
to
luck,
the
monsieur.
nothings of the common
If you
dead.
strike it rich,
There is
you
no
will
malign
remember
there,
poor little
see?
Bigot,
And
will
so
you
it
not?
make hard that
That's
I must
right.
kill her in
I
her sleep.
will not.
This turned
Thank
my
you
blood
so
cold,
much.
and it began to draw
Crew,
upon me
man,
that I was
the things I'll
accepting Van
do for a
Helsing's
decent
theories.
back.
But
Oh,
if
I
she
better
were
put
really
this stuff
dead,
back before
what was there
Mosley
of
has a
terror in the
conniption.
idea of killing her? He looked up at me and evidently saw the change in my face, for he said almost joyously, "Ah, you believe now." I answered, "Do not press me too hard all at once. I am willing to accept. How will you do this bloody work?" "I shall cut off her head and fill her mouth with garlic, and I shall drive a stake through her body." It made me shudder to think of so mutilating the body of the woman whom I had loved, and yet the feeling was not so strong as I had expected. I was in fact beginning to shudder at the presence of this being, this undead, as Van Helsing called it, and to loathe it. Is it possible that love is all subjective, or all objective? I waited a considerable time for Van Helsing to begin, but he stood as if wrapped in thought. Presently he closed the catch of his bag with a snap and said, "I have been thinking and have made up my mind as to what is best. If I did simply follow my inclining, I would do now, at this moment, what is to be done. But there are other things to follow, and things that are 1,000 times more difficult in that them we do not know. This is simple. She have yet no life taken, though that is of time, and to act now would be to take danger from her forever. But then we may have to want Arthur, and how shall we tell him of this? If you, who saw the wounds on Lucy's throat, and saw the wounds so similar on the child's at the hospital, if you, who saw the coffin empty last night and full today with a woman who have not changed, only to be more rose and more beautiful in a whole week after she died, If you know of this, and know of the white figure last night that brought the child to the churchyard, and yet of your own senses you did not believe, how then can I expect Arthur, who know none of these things, to believe? He doubted me when I took him from her kiss when she was dying. I know he has forgiven me, because in some mistaken idea I have done things that prevent him say goodbye as he ought. And he may think that in some more mistaken idea this woman was buried alive, and that, in most mistake of all, we have killed her. He will then argue back that it is we, mistaken ones, that have killed her by our ideas, and so he will be much unhappy always. Yet he never can be sure, and that is the worst of all. And he will sometimes think that she he loved was buried alive, and that will paint his dreams with horrors of what she must have suffered. And again he will think that we may be right, and that his so beloved was, after all, an undead. No. I told him once, and since then I learned more. Now, since I know it is all true,
This little cave
100,000 times more do I know that
as
he must pass through the bitter waters
on regional
to
maps
reach
for
the sea.
centuries, but the origins
He,
of its
poor fellow,
ownership
must have
and
1 hour
usage
that will
remain
make the very face
obscure.
of heaven grow black to him.
Wow,
Then we can
that's
act for good all
fascinating.
round and send him
I'll have
peace.
to write home about that
My
one.
mind is made up. Let us go. You return home for tonight to your asylum and see that all be well. As for me, I shall spend the night here in this churchyard in my own way. Tomorrow
Hey,
night you will
Wilkes,
come
how's
to
it
me to the
going?
Berkeley Hotel
Peachy.
at 10 of the
What
clock.
are you doing out
I shall send
Just
for Arthur to
taking in
come
the
too,
sights.
and also that so fine young man of America that gave his blood.
Yeah.
Later we shall all have work to do. I come with you so far as Piccadilly and there dine, for I must be back here before the sun set.
Say, mind if
So we
I ask
locked the
about your
tomb and
machine?
came away,
Yeah,
and got
I
over
do.
the wall of the
Oh,
churchyard, which is
come
not
on.
much of a task.
What is it?
And drove back.
You trying to call a
Piccadilly.
giant sandworm or what?
For your information, Knight, this is highly delicate scientific
Note
equipment.
left by
Yeah,
Van
so was
Helsing
a
in his
worm
portmanteau,
thumper.
Berkeley Hotel, directed to John Seward, M.D. Not delivered.
So, see
27
anything headed this
September.
way?
Friend John,
Should we head for
I
the
write this in
rocks?
case
Shut
anything
the hell
should
up,
happen.
Knight.
I go alone to watch in that churchyard. It pleases me that the
Look,
undead, Miss
it's a
Lucy,
giant
shall not
worm.
leave tonight.
Get out the
that so on the morrow
harpoons.
night she may be more eager.
Ah,
Therefore I
for
shall
Christ.
fix some things.
This is a
in
seismic
like knots,
survey machine,
garlic,
Knight.
and a crucifix.
Now shut the hell
and
up
so
before I
seal up
thump
the
you.
door of the tomb.
A seismic
She is
survey
young
machine.
as undead, and will
What's it
heed.
do?
Forget
Moreover,
it, Knight.
these are only to
Get
prevent
your
her
own damn
coming out.
theory.
They may not prevail on her wanting to get in.
You really think
For
there's
then
treasure
the
out
undead
here?
is desperate
Oh,
and
there's
must
a
find
treasure
the
all
line
right.
of least
Yeah?
resistance,
What do you think it
whatever,
is?
whatsoever
You know
it may
it's
be.
Sonia's girlfriend.
I shall be at hand all the
People
night
are
from
walking
sunset
around
till after the
don't
sunrise,
even know
and if
it.
there be aught
The
that may
Romans
be learned,
mined it.
I shall learn it.
Back then.
For Miss
They
Lucy,
knew how to
for
use
from
slave
her,
labor,
I have
right?
no fear.
Plus all them
But that
kings
other
that was
to whom
around.
is there that she is
Those guys
undead,
have regular hordes
he
of
have
them.
now the power
And
to
some of
seek
it's
her
bound to
tomb
have got
and find
lost.
shelter.
Well,
He is cunning, as I know
guess
from Mr.
so.
Jonathan,
And the bloke
from the
that
way
finds
that
it
all
is gonna
along
be
he has
flat out
fooled us when
stinking
he
rich.
played with us for Miss
I'll tell
Lucy's
you
life,
secret, mate.
and we lost.
That bloke.
And in many ways the undead are strong. We have always the strength in his hand of 20.
you don't think the treasure's
He have
related
always
to
the
the
strength
Grail?
in his hand
Holy
of 20
Grail.
men.
Yeah,
Even we four
that's
who
a
gave our
right one.
strength to Miss Lucy.
Did you know the
is
Nazis
also-
crawl all
it
over this
also
valley
belongs
looking
to
for it?
him.
No.
What a
Besides,
bunch
he
of
can summon his wolf,
jackasses.
and I know not
Hey,
what.
I was
So
thinking,
if it be that he
if I
come
find an
thither
owner
on
enough
this
cup,
night,
right?
he shall find
Maybe
me.
one with some
But
jewels
none
and shit
other
on
shall,
it. I can
until
pass
it
it
be
off
too late.
for the Grail.
But it may be that
Especially
he
if
will
it
not
came
attempt the
around
place.
Gee,
There is no reason why he
there's
should.
an idea.
His hunting ground is
Sure.
more full of game
If
than the
Hitler believed
churchyard
all
where
that
the undead
mystical
woman
crap, there's
sleeps,
got to be
and
somebody
the
else who
one
believe it.
old man
Maybe
watch.
dish out some serious
Therefore
cash.
I write this in case.
You seem
Take
pretty
the
sure
papers that are
about
with
finding
this,
that
the
treasure.
diaries of Harker and the rest,
That's right.
and read them, and
Well,
then
I ain't gonna
find
tell
this
you.
great undead,
don't ask.
and cut off his head, and burn his heart or drive a stake through it, so that the world may rest from him. If it be so, farewell. Van Helsing. Dr. Seward's Diary, 28 September. It is wonderful what a good night's sleep will do for one. Yesterday I was almost willing to accept Van Helsing's monstrous ideas, but now they seem to start out lurid before me as outrages on common sense. I have no doubt that he believes it all. I wonder if his mind can have become in any way unhinged. Surely there must be some rational explanation of all these mysterious things. Is it possible that the professor can have done it himself? He is so abnormally clever that if he went off his head, he could carry out his intent with regard to some fixed idea in a wonderful way. I am loath to think it, and indeed it would be almost as great a marvel as the other to find that Van Helsing was mad. But anyhow, I shall watch him carefully. I may get some light on the mystery. 29 September, morning. Last night, at a little before 10 o'clock, Arthur and Quincy came into Van Helsing's room. He told us all what he wanted us to do, but especially addressing himself to Arthur, as if all our wills were centered in his. He began by saying that he hoped we would all come with him to... "For," he said, "there is a grave duty to be done there. You were doubtless surprised at my letter?" This query was directly addressed to Lord Godalming. I was. It rather upset me for a bit. There's been so much trouble around my house of late that I could do without any more. I have been curious too as to what you mean.
This slab
Quincy and I have talked it over, but the more we talked, the more puzzled we got. So now I can say for myself that I'm about of the tree as to any meaning about anything.
Sword still draws curious seekers, hoping for more clues.
Oh, said the professor. Then you are nearer the beginning, both of you, than friend John here,
There were
who
buildings
has to
here.
go a long way back before he can even get
There's
so
not a
far
lot of growth
as we
going
begin.
on in this area, is there?
It was evident that he recognized my return to my old doubting frame of mind without my saying a word. Then turning to the other two, he said with intense gravity, I want your permission to do what I think good this night. It is, I know, much to ask, and when you know what it is I propose to do, you will know, and only then, how much. Therefore, may I ask that you promise me in the dark, so that afterwards,
meeting a
though you
girl
may
like
be angry
you
with
in a
me for a
place
time,
like this.
I must not disguise from myself
hello,
the
Monsieur
possibility
Knight.
that such may be.
Sightseeing,
You shall
are we?
not blame
I
yourself
am
for
refreshing my
anything.
memory for tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
That's frank anyhow.
You mean for that tour
broke in
thing?
Quincy.
So
I'll
what's so
answer for the
special about
professor.
this place?
I don't quite see his drift, but
Nothing.
I swear he's honest.
And anyway,
that's
you
good
are
enough
not
for
taking
me.
the tour, so why
I
do you
thank you, sir,
care?
said Van Helsing
You got a
proudly.
point there.
I have done myself the honor of counting you one trusting friend,
I don't
and
think
such
she's in the
endorsement
mood
is
for
dear to me.
company.
He held out a hand, which Quincy took. Then Arthur spoke out. Dr. Van Helsing, I don't quite like to buy a pig in a poke, as they say in Scotland, and if it be anything in which my honor as a gentleman, or my faith as a Christian is concerned, I cannot make such a promise. If you can assure me that what you intend does not violate either of those two, then I give my consent at once, though for the life of me I cannot understand what you are driving at. I accept your limitation, said Van Helsing, and all I ask of you is that if you feel it necessary to condemn any act of mine, you will first consider it well, and be satisfied that it does not violate your reservations.
It's a diagram of the chateau that used to be
Agreed,
here.
said Arthur. That is only fair. And now that the pourparlers are over, may I ask what it is we are to do? I want you to come with me, and to come in secret to the
Not
churchyard
much
at
left of the place,
Kingstead.
is there?
Arthur's face fell as he said in an amazed sort of way, Where poor Lucy is buried? The professor bowed. Arthur went on, And when there? To enter the tomb. Arthur stood up. Professor, are you in earnest, or is it some monstrous joke? Pardon me, I see that you are in earnest. He sat down again, but I could see that he sat firmly and proudly, as one who is on his dignity. There was silence until he asked again, And when in the tomb? To open the coffin. That is too much, he said, angrily rising again. I am willing to be patient in all things that are unreasonable, but in this desecration of the grave, of one who... He fairly choked with indignation. The professor looked pityingly at him. If I could spare you one pang, my poor friend, he said, God knows I would. But this night our feet must tread in thorny paths, or later, and forever, the feet you love must walk in paths of flame. Arthur looked up with set white face and said, Take care, sir, take care. Would it not be well to hear what I have to say? Said Van Helsing, and then you will at least know the limit of my purpose. Shall I go on? That's fair enough, broke in Morris. After a pause, Van Helsing went on, evidently with an effort. Miss Lucy is dead, is it not so? Yes. Then there can be no wrong to her. But if she be not dead... Arthur jumped to his feet. Good God, he cried, what do you mean? Has there been any mistake? Has she been buried alive? He groaned in anguish that not even hope could soften. I did not say she was alive, my child. I did not think it. I go no further than to say that she might be undead. Undead? Not alive? What do you mean? Is this all a nightmare, or what is it? There are mysteries which men can only guess at, which age by age they may
He
solve
might have been
only in
around last
part.
night.
Believe me, we are now on the verge of one, but I have not done. May I cut off the head of dead Miss Lucy? Heavens and earth, no! Cried Arthur in a storm of passion.
Hi
Not
there.
for the wide world
it's
will I
you.
consent to any mutilation
You
of
are
her
feeling
dead body.
better, I hope.
Dr. Van
That was a
Helsing,
nasty
you
bump you
tried
had
me
on the
too
head
far.
last night.
What have I
Sure.
done to you that you should torture me
You
so?
took me over to
What
Rennes
did
le
that
Chateau,
poor
right?
sweet girl
Yes,
do that
you must
should want
remember
to
the car.
to cast
You
such
said it had a
dishonor on her
smell like
grave?
the
Are
garlic.
you mad that speak of such
Probably
things?
my dog
Or
Fifi.
am I mad
He
to
loves
listen
to
to
eat the
them?
garlic and
Don't
then
dare
he...
to think more of such a desecration.
Well, thanks for
I shall
jogging my
not
memory.
give my consent to
Oh,
anything
it's
you
my
do.
pleasure,
I have a
monsieur.
duty to do in protecting her grave from outrage.
You were here
and
last
by
night.
God, I
Did
shall
you
do it.
see two men with a trunk
Van
come out
Helsing
of that
rose up from
station
where he
just
had all the
before I
time been
did?
seated and
Yes,
said gravely
but they
and
didn't need a
sternly,
ride from me.
My
No,
Lord
what they
Godalming,
do?
They
I
drove
too
off,
have
monsieur.
a duty to do.
Yes,
A
but
duty to
how?
others.
Did they have a
duty
car
to
parked
you.
here?
A duty
No.
to the dead, and by
Well,
God, I
yes,
shall do
guess
it.
it was parked.
All I ask you now is
at
that you
the
come with
time.
me, that you look and listen, and if when
Could you
later
tell
I
me
make the same request,
exactly what you saw?
do not be more eager
Two
for
men
its
with a trunk
fulfillment even
came
than I
out of
am.
the train station
Then
and...
shall I do my duty, whatever
I'm
it may
having a
seem to me.
hard time
And then, to
remembering.
follow of your lordship's wishes, I shall hold myself at your disposal to render an account to you when and where you will. His voice broke a little, and he went on with a voice full of pity. But, I beseech you, do not go forth in anger with me. In a long life of acts which were often not pleasant to do, and which sometimes did wring my heart, I have never had so heavy a task as now.
My memory needs more help
Believe me
than
that if the
that,
time
monsieur.
comes for you to change your mind towards me, one look from you will wipe away all this so sad hour. For I would do what a man can,
Très bien.
to save you from sorrow.
Now, I tell you,
Just think. For why should I give myself so much of labor
there
and
was
so much of
waiting
sorrow?
a car.
I have come here from
Maybe
my
for
own
an hour.
land to do what I
Then
can
the
of
two
good.
men came out,
At the
they
first
get in
to
the
please
car,
my friend
and
John,
voila.
and then
What
to
kind
help
of
a
car?
sweet young lady,
Very nice,
whom
very
too I
fine.
come to love.
It does not
For
smell
her,
like the garlic,
I am
this
ashamed
car.
to say so
What
much,
was the
but I
make?
say it in kindness.
It was a sedan.
I gave what
As
you
to
gave.
the make,
The blood
my
of my
eyes are
veins.
not so good.
I gave it.
You want
I,
more money?
who was not like
No,
you, her
monsieur.
lover, but
My
only
eyes
her
are
physician
really
and her
not
friend.
so good.
I gave to
Oh.
her my nights
Well,
and
what about
days
color?
before death,
Black,
after
very
death.
black, this car.
And if my death
And
can
the
do her
driver?
good even now, when she
not
is
old,
the dead undead,
well dressed.
she shall have it
Oh,
freely.
and the trunk.
He
Like
said
it
this
was
with a
the
very
Queen's
grave,
china they
sweet
handled
pride,
that trunk.
and Arthur
Into
was
the
much
back
affected
seat
by
it went,
it.
not
He
even
took
in
the
the
old man's
boot.
hand and said in a broken voice,
One more thing.
"Oh,
Which way did they go?
it is hard to
The
think
same
of
way
it,
I took you,
and I
monsieur,
cannot understand.
toward Rennes le
But
Chateau.
at least I shall go with you and wait." And that concludes chapter 15, the third week of our read-along together of Dracula. We'll find out next week what happens when the gentlemen all go back to the cemetery to investigate if Lucy Westenra is indeed in her grave.
Hello there,
and
mademoiselle.
if it changes their thoughts
Bonjour.
about what needs to be done.
Where is it you wish to go?
I'm already
Thank
there.
you very much for joining me today. I hope you
I
have a
want to ask
wonderful,
you a few
wonderful weekend.
questions.
And I will see you
Oui.
next time, friends.
All right.
Bye.
Do you have a record of a man getting off the Naples train last night?
There was no train from Naples last night, monsieur. We have very limited service.
Is that so? What trains did come in?
We have a set schedule, monsieur. The trains are listed on the board.
What other trains had passengers disembark last night?
Un moment. There was one passenger from Rome, none from Madrid, two from Nice earlier in the day.
Great, thanks. Did two men with a trunk come in from Paris yesterday evening?
We had 3 arrivals last night from Paris, but I have no idea who they were.
Do you know where they went?
Mais no. We only keep a record of the number who arrive, and only that because there is some talk of cutting service to Guisa. We have few visitors, and most of them come by auto.
It's a list of arrivals. Yesterday was Wednesday, so the only trains that came in were from Nice, Paris, Madrid, and Rome. There is no Naples route. In other words, Buccelli is lying. Either he didn't take the train at all, or he didn't take the one he says he took. The beat-to-crap moped. I wonder who got stuck with it.
Oh my gosh, that was stressful.
This valley has been called the Dead Man on regional maps for centuries. Some authors have attempted to link it to the Ren Enigma because one of the parchment ciphers contains the phrase, "He is there, dead." I remember something about those parchments from the museum, but I don't see how it could relate to the case. Mosley? What the hell is he doing out here?
Oh, hi, Gabe.
It's Gabriel, you flatfoot. What are you doing here?
Me? Oh, just looking around.
I thought you said you were busy this afternoon.
I am busy. I'm busy looking around. And if I'd wanted my mother along, I would have invited her, Knight.
Okay, all right. Forget I mentioned it. I could swear he's up to something. I just don't know what. So, why are you looking around here?
I saw the sign and it looked interesting, okay? The Dead Man. Now, doesn't that sound like something I'd find interesting?
How do you know l'homme mort meant the dead man? Your French is worse than mine.
I saw it in a guidebook. Look, why don't you go catch some kidnappers, will you?
I'm gone. I saw your moped in the parking lot. Nice back.
You know, go to hell. Somebody in the group screwed up, or the moped guy screwed up. I don't know. Anyway, he hadn't checked off his list. Can you believe it? I was lucky to get anything. I'm gonna have a word with Madeline about it.
Oh, you should. Really. You shouldn't have to put up with that.
Tell me about it. So, what are you
friends,
driving?
welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager
one
of the
of the
Pacific
bigger
Beach Library.
bikes.
Thank you for
It's
joining me
a
for
little
day
rough.
16 of our read-along together
That being
of
small town.
Dracula by Bram Stoker. I
could
realized
swear
as
he's-
I was pulling this up that I did not really
It's
remember
the
much of
great
what had happened in
detective
chapter 15,
himself.
so we're going to have a fun time
You
reviewing
needs
that
to get off
together.
those
It'll be a good refresher
beanies.
for me as well. Today's tea that I'm drinking, because I wanted a red-based tea because I was thinking about the whole bloody theme again because it's
I'm
Dracula.
glad I didn't end
I'm
up with
drinking
that
a
bike.
rooibos, which
I'd
is
have to hurt somebody.
It is a red tea, although I think this one looks
Look at
kind
it
of
this way.
it looks more of
Mosley's a lot better
a
suited to
light
that bike
brown
than
rather
I
than a
am.
red to me, but it's a chai rooibos. So we'll go ahead and pour out. This one, it says the ingredients. Oh, of course, I have it just beyond the cup, so I can't read it, so we'll have to wait a moment. It smells really good. Let's see. So this one is by Yogi Tea, and it's a chai rooibos, and the ingredients are organic rooibos leaf, organic cardamom pod, organic cinnamon bark, organic ginger root, organic clove bud, and organic stevia leaf. It's really good.
FED039A.
I like that
is
the
Wilkes's
spicy
moped.
flavor that you get with the chai. It's nice. Okay. Oh, sorry, I was just reading. It says, steep it for 7 minutes. I think that's about what I was at. Then it says for a stronger tea, use 2 tea bags. I'm only 1. Hello! But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Friday's chapter. It was chapter 15. And again, that was our last Friday for a while because now, like I mentioned before, I'm doing like the split schedule, which is a very good thing. So it means that our library is now offering service Monday through Saturday.
Good afternoon,
and so
Mr.
today,
Knight.
this week we'll just
Back
be reading
at
Monday
ya.
through Thursday.
You look comfortable.
Today we'll start by
yes, I'm
reviewing
enjoying
Friday's
the sun
reading, which was chapter
immensely,
15.
thank you.
It was a continuation of Dr. Seward's diary. And where it began was just after the revelation from Dr. Van Helsing to Dr. Seward that Lucy is now the one who is going out and biting the necks of innocent children and sucking their blood. Oh dear. And so basically it starts out with Dr. Seward very strong, this comes back to me now, very strongly resisting the idea that Miss Lucy could be involved in any way with such a horrific crime. And Dr. Van Helsing is trying to convince him. He says, I know the doctor who works at the hospital where the latest child was taken. Let's go over there. We'll examine the child. And they do see very similar bites to the ones that Lucy had on her neck. He also describes the Blue-fur lady as having been a very beautiful, girl, woman, and everything like that. Afterwards, they go out. And Dr. Van Helsing says, we have a couple tasks to do. First thing we're going to do is we're going to wait till it gets really late and dark. And then what's especially creepy, we're going to sneak into the graveyard. And we're going to get into the tomb of Lucy Westenra, because I happen to have the key. And we're going to get in there and we're going to open her coffin. It's like, what? Yes, that's what they're going to do. So they go in there and they open the coffin. And again, Seward is upset by this. He sees it as a desecration to Lucy's grave. Why are they doing this to her? But when they open the coffin, they find indeed that the coffin is empty. And Dr. Seward is just amazed. He doesn't know what's happened to her body. He refuses to think it could be anything supernatural or
That's
wrong.
one
I mean,
heck
maybe
of a
something
big
wrong in the
black
sense that
rock.
somebody may have stolen her body, which happens sometimes, but it couldn't be anything worse. What ends up happening next is that Dr. Van Helsing says, fine,
So,
let's wait a while longer.
is there something
you watch
special
one side
about
of the
this
cemetery,
place?
I'll watch the
Rock
other,
necklace.
and we will both keep our eyes peeled to
just
make
a
sure there's
luckily.
nothing weird going on.
It means
Weirder
black
than what
water.
we're
I
already
kind of
doing.
figured out that
And
part.
so
There's
they,
a water rock around here too.
Are the names
sorry,
supposed to
they
mean
do find this
something?
amusing.
Yeah.
It's kind of great.
They mean black and white.
They
Now
wait,
stop bothering
and
me.
eventually,
Go find Madeline if you want to bleed it to her.
Dr. Stewart says he sees
Having
something
better
white
luck with
flitting through,
sandworms
and
here.
it kind of
Go
goes
to
off,
hell,
and then he
Knight.
sees the
When I find that treasure,
Professor Van Helsing,
you're going to be laughing
holding
out
in
of
his
the other
arms
side
the
of your
child.
face.
And he's like,
If
now
you
are you
find the
satisfied to see
treasure,
what's
I'll
what she's
laugh
done?
out of
It's
any
like, no, I don't
orifice
see any
you
connection to
desire.
Lucy. I don't see
I'll
anything to do
remember
with her at all. It's like, all right, fine. So they let the child go. They give the child back to like a policeman. They leave it out where the policeman can find it, so the child will get taken home properly. Then what they do is late in the following afternoon, Van Helsing says we have another part to our mission. And they go back to the cemetery. They go back into the graveyard. They open the vault again, and they get inside and they open her coffin once more, and they see this time, instead of an empty coffin, they find Lucy Westenra's body. And indeed, not just her body that by now should be showing signs
Arnaud
of
lives
decay after
there.
a week
He
of being
sure
dead.
has a taste
But
for
she
the
looks
morbid.
even more radiantly beautiful and healthier than before she had died. And so Dr. Van Helsing is trying to again convince Dr. Seward that Lucy has risen and come back, that there is something strange, and Dr. Seward is just resisting the idea. It's like, no, it can't be. And then Dr. Van Helsing says, well, there's things we have to do.
That may be, but
he starts to convince him, and then he kind of goes in for it. He says, well, what we have to do is we have to cut off her head and then fill her mouth with garlic, and then I'll drive a stake through her heart. It's a little much. Dr. Van Helsing doesn't hesitate at all in this. But he's trying to, again, have this idea that he's trying to explain to Dr. Seward that because Lucy was sleepwalking when she was first attacked by Dracula, and that indeed it was when she died when she was in a sleeping state. He says that basically in trance she died, and in trance she is undead. So again,
there are always diggers.
Lucy in a way wasn't aware of what was going on and culpable in that sense, but at the same time they cannot let her body live because in this undead state because she is doing harm.
I wish to know how many come seeking and how they...
It gets a little weirder, though, because Dr. Van Helsing says instead of just killing Lucy in this way that we know must be done to protect her soul, whatever's left of it, and to protect the community from being attacked by her, what they need to do is convince Arthur Holmwood, her fiancé, of what's going on so that he will understand why they're doing this to her. And so they call in Quincy Morris and Arthur Holmwood to speak with Professor Van Helsing and Dr. Seward. Now, by now, Dr. Seward has had a day or two to process, and he's convinced himself that there's no way what he thought was possible, that Lucy is an undead being, is indeed still possible. He's convinced himself that it cannot be.
If I see your epic name pop up, I'm gonna be like,
I'll go get the Harley. That must be Chester's car. I won't be forgetting that color soon. I don't need to write down Larry's license plate number.
Hello. May I help you?
I hope so. The name is Knight. Gabriel Knight. The Abbé at Rennes-le-Chateau recommended you as a Templar scholar.
Did he now?
Yep. He said, go talk to Larry Chester about the Templars. And then he said, and let me know what you think.
Well, in that case, you'd better come in. Can I get you some tea?
No, thank you.
Now then, what can I do for you, Mr. Knight?
I read in the museum that several of the Templar founders and the Grand Master were from this region.
That's true. They also had several bases here and owned a great deal of land. The Chateau de Serres, for example, was built on top of an old Templar fortress.
Why were the Templars accused of heresy?
There are many theories, but most scholars agree that King Philip was jealous of their authority. He wanted to confiscate their land and their reputed treasure. Unfortunately, the Templars themselves helped him make his case. They boasted of the secrets they'd learned in the Holy Land.
Secrets?
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager of the Pacific Beach Library. Thank you for joining us for day 17 of our read-along
together. Of course, to Christendom, this was nothing but witchcraft. Those who confessed were released. Those who did not,
we had a really exciting chapter yesterday, and I'm excited to see how the book is about to transition to another phase.
And they
Let's go ahead and start off with some tea, because it is the tea with Dracula group. Let's see. Today's tea is, I'm trying to remember what it was. Today's
is there
tea
any
is a
reason
green
to think the
tea
Templars
with
left
flavor.
something
That's what it was.
here specifically?
It's not unknown that the Templars were digging in the region.
That is a very slow
They claimed they were mining the old Roman gold veins, but they hired only German workers who couldn't communicate
I'm
with
not
the
smelling
locals.
the cranberry very much. It's
Naturally,
mainly
that
green
led
tea.
to some speculation.
Last one for me. I gotta get to bed early.
Ooh,
Madame
does have cranberry
Girard
flavor.
mentioned that the Holy Grail is sometimes linked to the Templars.
It's
It
pretty
is,
mild
yes.
with the fruit, though. It's mainly the
Many of
green
the
tea
early
flavor,
Grail
but
legends,
again, I like the green
the
tea,
knights
so
were
that's okay.
described as
Alright,
Templars,
so
wearing the white
yesterday's
mantle
reading in
with the
Dracula.
red cross.
Yesterday,
She said something about them actually
yesterday we
finding
read
the
chapter
Grail
16,
in the Holy Land.
and chapter
Do you
16
think that's
was
possible?
exciting because
Yes,
in that one,
I
Dr.
do.
Van Helsing brought Dr.
So
Van
you
Helsing and
think the
Dr. Seward
Templars
brought
found the Holy Grail
Arthur
in
Holmwood
Jerusalem
and
and brought
also
it back
Quincy
here?
Morris to the
Let me put
cemetery,
it this way.
and they
When the Templars
they
were
opened up
founded
the grave,
in 1118,
the
there were
casket
9
of Lucy
knights.
Westenra,
Their
and
stated
they discovered that it
purpose
was
was to
empty.
protect
Then,
pilgrims on the road.
He
But
tried
for
again to
years
convince
they
them
did
that she is
nothing
an
of the
undead.
sort.
And
They were
what
given
he did was
quarters
he
in the Temple of
closed off
Solomon
the
by
tomb.
King
He
Bedouin
crumpled
himself.
up
That is not what I
There they
the
stayed.
the host from
And there
the
they
from the church,
excavated
and he
for
mixed
9
that with like a
years.
putty, and he put
Then,
that in to seal the
in
doorway so she could not
1128,
get
they
back into the
changed
tomb.
completely.
And then
They returned to
as
Europe
the
and
night
began
progressed,
recruiting. Their
Lucy
wealth
returned,
and power grew
again
on
carrying
an
a child,
unprecedented
and they
curve.
So
they basically cornered her
do
between a
think
crucifix
they found the
and
Grail?
where she wanted to
I think you're
retreat back
taking the
into
legend
her,
of the
her
Grail
tomb,
a little
but could
too
not because he sealed
literally.
it off with holy artifacts.
As with many
And
things
so
of the Middle Ages,
eventually
it
he
was often
breaks off a
wiser
little bit
and
of it, so
safer
there's just like a tiny
to
little
speak in
crack.
allegory.
Like they describe
What's
it
the
as
Holy Grail
just
an
small enough that
allegory
like
of?
I have a feeling
you could
that
just
will
barely
come to
squeeze a
light
knife blade into it,
sometime in the
and
next
she manages,
decade.
even though they see her, and it looks like her body is
The Templars
healthy
had a
and,
lot of wealth,
although
right?
covered
Gold,
in blood
money,
because she's been,
land.
drinking blood from a
Absolutely.
child.
And that's one
They
possibility
see her
for
body
the
just, like,
alleged local
dissipate,
treasure.
like, squeeze through that
the
little hole
Templar
to get back into the
stash.
tomb. So
Yes.
there is no longer
But
any doubt
you don't
whatsoever
think so.
that Lucy
They had
Westenra
warning before their
is
arrest.
something wrong.
Perhaps
She has
some
become
chose
an
to believe
undead
that the
creature.
church would
She is
ultimately
no
protect
longer,
them,
you know,
but they
a
had
holy
enough
thing.
sense to move
And
the
so
treasure.
they're all
where?
convinced that she does
There
need
are
to be killed.
various locations.
Also, what's interesting too,
Ireland
before
and
that
Scotland
moment when
have a
when
great
she
deal
slides
of
back into the
Templar
tomb,
history, for example.
she tries to entice Arthur to her side.
If the Templars
and Arthur is
smuggled out
almost
their
hypnotized
treasure,
and tries to
wouldn't
go
that
towards
sort of
her
blow the Grail
before
theory?
Dr. Van Helsing
Perhaps
stops
there were
them
some
again with the golden
things that were
crucifix,
too
and that's what makes her
large
recoil.
or too, shall we say, localized
And it is with
to
Arthur's
take with
blessing
them.
that they agree that they're going to go back
No,
and take
they
care of
left
this.
something
And so
behind
then, the
in
next
the
afternoon,
Languedoc.
after
You can be sure of that,
they
Mr.
go
White.
back and they open
The
up her
Abbé
tomb again,
mentioned
and this
that
time they
you're
find
working
her
on a
body
book.
in the casket.
Yes,
And again,
I'm a
she
historian.
looks different,
And
but
you're
she
writing
looks
about the
beautiful.
Templars?
But they can
Oh,
tell
exactly.
she's not the same Lucy she was.
This area
and then
is rich
right before
in
Dr. Van
Templar
Helsing is going
history.
to give her
That's
the
why I thought
permanent
I'd
death,
come here to write. It's
he
a
basically
kind of
says something like, well,
sabbatical,
who really
A
deserves to do
sabbatical
this?
from what?
Who would later
I
on
teach
because it's
at
not
a
that
prep
so much that
school
they
in
are
Manchester.
killing Lucy, but they are restoring Lucy's soul, allowing her soul to be at
I don't
peace
have
instead
anything
of
else
being,
to say to him.
having her body like overtaken by this demon that's doing wrong. And so who deserves
Thanks for the
privilege
info,
of doing
Mr.
this is
Chester.
Arthur. And so basically what it ends up happening is the other three
most
men are
welcome.
reading from a holy
What
book
is
while
your interest in the Templars?
Arthur,
if you
the
don't mind my
fiancé, is
asking.
holding a
No,
wooden stake
I don't
over
mind.
Lucy's heart and then
Thanks
pounding it
again.
with a hammer. When that happens, she's of course woken from her slumber, not in a good way. Eventually, though, it does kill her, and they see that her face changes, and she has the peaceful face again, the gentle face. They can tell that Lucy's soul is her own again, and that she's no longer being inhabited by that demon of the undead, whatever it was, the vampire. And so, just really neat. It's a really
It
good
looks
scene.
like the cavalry has arrived.
After the other gentlemen leave, he does. Van Helsing allows and encourages Arthur to kiss her goodbye one
Gabriel,
more time. Now that
are
she's
you
safe
all
and she's
right?
not going to bite
Why?
him.
Is my hair
And then
messed up?
he goes.
I'm not.
And Dr.
Prince
Seward
James
and
told
Dr.
me
Van
to be
Helsing
expecting
cut
you.
off her
Is there
head,
somewhere more
stuff her mouth
private
with
where we can
garlic,
talk?
And they're hoping
Yeah,
that should
I have a
finally
room.
solve
Come on up.
the problem of Lucy possibly,
Here's your fee,
continuing her
Mr.
undead
Knight.
life.
Prince James wanted
Now,
me to express
here's where
his
it gets really
gratitude
good.
to you for tracking the
So they've done this
kidnappers.
thing, right? They've
Yeah.
basically vampire hunted, and they Dr.
Have you
Van
learned
Helsing
anything
says,
since
we
this
have
morning?
done this thing.
I checked
we
at
have
the
done
train
a
station.
wonderful thing that
The
we have
taxi
helped
driver saw the
restore
two men in
Lucy
the
to
trunk.
herself.
They were picked up
But
by
it
a
is
black
not enough.
sedan.
There's more we
He
must
didn't
do.
get the model,
And
but he
basically
said it looked
because
expensive.
we need to
Did he
find
say
out,
which way they
we need
went?
to stop what,
They
what
headed for
brought
the
this to
main
Lucy,
valley
what brought
loop.
this problem
Anything
here. We need
else?
to find
Well, I haven't
her,
seen any trace of the baby, but there's a tour
her
group
corruptor,
staying
which
here.
we know is Dracula.
Most of them arrived last
And
night.
so what he does
None
is
of
he
them
invites
are the
the
men
other
from the
gentlemen
train,
to
but
meet
they
with him
might
2
be
nights
linked
from then.
somehow.
And he says he's
Emilio
going to bring
Bazza
2 other people
and a
who they
Signore
don't know yet.
Buccelli
But
arrived at the
but all of
hotel
them
around the
together
time
will
of the
have a
Paris
task to
train.
do, a terrible task
Buccelli
that we
claims
must not
he
draw
came in
back.
on a train from Naples,
So
but
that was
Cuiza
the conclusion
doesn't
of
have
chapter
a Naples
16.
route.
Let's find
Very
out today.
curious.
I
We'll look
strongly
into it.
suspect it is
Wait.
the Harkins.
There's something I didn't tell
the
Prince
Harkers,
James on the
Jonathan
phone.
and
Yes.
Nina will be joining
When I
them,
was
but let's
coming
find
to
out
on the
for
train,
sure. And
I
let's see
heard
what
one of the
happens when they
kidnappers
all
say
come together.
something in French. I remember the word
All
San
right,
Grial.
chapter
It means
17,
Holy
Dr.
Grail.
Seward's diary.
Do you have any idea
continued.
what the Holy Grail might have to
When
do
we
with
arrived at
Prince
the Berkeley
James'
Hotel, Van
son?
Helsing
I'm
found
sorry.
a telegram waiting
We're not
for him.
authorized to discuss
I'm
Prince
coming
James's
up by
affairs.
train. Jonathan
But
at
thank you
Whitby.
for your observations.
Important news.
Good night.
Nina Harker.
Miss Nakamura, it was a
The
pleasure
professor
meeting
was
you.
delighted.
Yes, you
Ah,
you
that
too.
wonderful Madam Mina, he
Goodbye,
said.
Miss
Pearl
Nakamura.
among women.
Mr. Knight?
She arrived, but I cannot stay. She must go to your house, friend John. You must meet her at the station. Telegraph her en route so that she may be prepared. When the wire was dispatched, he had a cup of tea.
Damn, I
Over
thought we
it,
had a
he told me of a
case.
diary kept by Jonathan Harker when abroad,
do.
and gave me a
Well,
typewritten copy
Prince
of
James
it,
let you
as
go.
also of
Yeah,
Mrs. Harker's
that's
diary
his
at Whitby.
prerogative.
Take
Wait,
these,
but
he
if
said,
the
and
kidnappers
study them
weren't
well.
the night visitors.
When I have
Who says they
returned,
weren't?
you will be
I
master
saw
of
them.
all the facts,
There
and
was
we can
something
then better
not
enter
right
on our
about 'em at all.
inquisition. Keep
Okay,
them safe,
what about
for there
the
is in them
Sangreal
much
thing?
of treasure.
What would
You
vampires
will
want with the
need
Holy
all your
Grail?
faith,
I don't
even
know.
you who have
Well,
had such
McDougal
an
and Mallory
experience
sure
as that
seem
of
to
today.
know.
What is
Maybe
here
Prince
told,
James has
he
the
laid his
Grail,
hand
and the
heavily
kidnapping
and
is an
gravely
attempt at
on the packet of
blackmail.
papers
I
as he
don't
spoke.
think Prince James
May be
has
the beginning
Grail.
of the end
Look,
to
there's this
you
whole
and
treasure
me and
hunting
many
thing
another.
linked to this town.
Or
I
it
don't
may
have time to
sound the
explain.
knell of
Could
the
you please
undead
hook
who
up
walk
Sydney
the earth.
and check out the
Read
Grail
all, I
and
pray
vampires?
you, with the open
Yeah,
mind.
sure.
And if you can add in any
And,
way to the story here told,
Looks
do
like you
so,
might have to stay
for
with me.
It is all important.
The hotel's
You
booked
have
up.
kept diary of
Oh.
all these so strange things, is it
all
not
right.
so? Yes.
Say, do you
Then
mind
we
waiting
shall
till
go
tomorrow
through
morning
all
on
these
the research
together
thing?
when we meet.
I have to get Sydney
He then made
configured,
ready
and
for his
I am
departure,
pretty beat.
and shortly after
No,
drove off
that's
to Liverpool
fine.
Street.
You must have been
I
really
took my way to
worried.
Paddington,
Sorry,
where I
Gracie.
arrived about 15
I'm gonna
minutes
go
before
keep
the
an eye
train
on my
came in.
replacements.
Bye.
The crowd melted away after the bustling fashion common to arrival platforms, and I was beginning to feel uneasy, lest I might miss my guest, when a sweet-faced, dainty-looking girl stepped up to me and after a quick glance said, "Dr. Seward, is it not?" "And you are Mrs. Harker," I answered at once, whereupon she held out her hand. "I knew you from the description of poor dear Lucy, but—" She stopped suddenly and a quick blush overspread her face. The blush that rose to my own cheeks somehow set us both at ease, for it was a tacit answer to her own.
Monsieur
I
Knight,
got her
I
luggage,
hope
which
your
included a
head is
typewriter,
feeling better.
and we took the
It
underground
is,
to
actually.
Fenchurch
Thanks
Street.
for asking.
After I had sent a wire to my housekeeper to have a sitting
you
room
see
and bedroom prepared at once
or
for Mrs.
hear
Harker.
a baby
In
last
due
night?
time we arrived.
No,
She
no,
knew, of
Monsieur
course,
Knight,
that the place
not at
was a
the
lunatic
hotel.
asylum,
I hear
but I
my
could see
niece
that she
at
was
home,
unable
oui,
to
but
repress a shudder
here
when we entered.
there are
She
no
told me
babies
that, if
staying
she
at
might,
the
she would
hotel.
come presently to my study, as she had much
I
to
was
say.
looking at the
So
register.
here I am, finishing
Do
my
you
entry
remember
in my
exactly when
phonographed
people
diary
arrived
whilst
last
I await
night?
her. As yet, I have not had the chance of
The
looking at
big
the
group
papers that
arrives
Van Helsing
together
left with
maybe
me,
7,
though they lie both
7:30,
before me.
and
I must
later,
get her
Monsieur
interested in
Bazin.
something,
What time?
so that I may have an
Maybe
opportunity of reading them.
9
She does
o'clock?
not know how
No,
precious
no, more
time
like
is,
10, I
or what
think.
what
Then
a
you,
task we
maybe
have
an
in
hour
hand.
later,
I must
then
be careful not
Signore
to frighten her.
Buccelli?
What
she
time
is.
did Buccelli get here?
Just after
Mina Harker's
midnight,
journal,
I remember,
29
because the
September.
clock chimes at midnight,
After I had
and
tidied
I sometimes
myself, I
get
went
a
down to
bit
Dr. Seward's study. At the
nervous,
door, I
and I
paused a
lock the
moment,
door.
for I thought I heard him talking with someone.
Signore
As,
Buccelli
however, he
came
had pressed me to be
after I
quick,
locked
I
it.
knocked at the door,
I had to let
and on
him
his
in.
calling out,
Nervous?
"Come in," I
What are you
entered.
getting nervous about?
To my intense
Oh, Monsieur
surprise,
Knight,
there was
we
no
have
one with
many
him.
old
He was quite
legends in
alone,
this area.
and on the table opposite him was what I knew
You didn't see
at
two
once
men
from the
with a
description
trunk
to be
last
a
night, did you?
phonograph.
Maybe
I
outside
had
in the
never
parking
seen
lot
one
or
and was much
driving
interested.
around town.
I hope I did not keep you
No,
waiting,
no,
I
no,
said,
not in
but I
town.
stayed at the
This
door
is
as
a
I heard
very
you
quiet
talking
place,
and thought there
Monsieur.
was someone with
Monsieur
you.
Mosley
Oh,
and
he replied
Monsieur
with a
Willis
style, a
arrived
smile.
with the two
I was
group,
only entering
but
my
I
diary.
don't remember it from.
Your diary?
Okay,
I asked him in surprise.
thanks.
Yes, he answered. I keep it in this. As he spoke, he laid his hand on the phonograph. I felt quite excited over it and blurted out, "Why, this beats even shorthand. May I hear it say something?" "Certainly," he replied with alacrity, and stood up to put it in train
So,
for speaking.
Buccelli,
Then he paused,
did you
and a
have a
troubled
productive
look
day?
overspread his face.
It was
"The
relaxing,
fact
Mr.
is,"
Williams.
he began awkwardly,
Relaxing?
"I only keep
You
my
must not be
diary
looking for
in
treasure,
it,
then.
and as it
Nothing
is
relaxing about
entirely,
that.
almost
Si,
entirely
certo.
about my cases,
I
it
am
may
a
be
scholar,
awkward.
not a
That
hunter of
is,
fortune.
I mean..."
Glad to hear it.
He stopped,
There's too
and I
many
tried
damn
to help him
snoops
out of
around
his
here.
embarrassment.
Are there?
"You helped to attend dear
Why?
Lucy at the end.
Who do you mean?
Let me hear
Hell, why
how
don't you
she
join me
died.
if we're gonna talk?
For all that I know
I
of
ain't
her,
gonna lie.
I shall be very grateful.
I don't know where
She
the hell
was
the
very,
women are.
very
Very
dear
well.
to me." To my surprise, he answered, with a horror-struck look in his face, "Tell you of her death? Not for the wide world. world. Why not? I asked, for some grave, terrible feeling was coming over me. Again he paused, and I could see that he was trying to invent
Guess all
an
that
excuse.
sun made him hungry.
At length he
Didn't do
stammered
much
out,
for his aroma
"You
either.
see, I do not know how to pick out any particular part of the diary." Even while he was speaking, an idea dawned upon him, and he said with
Signore
unconscious simplicity,
Buccelli,
in a different voice and
rider
with the
of the
naivete of a
mysterious
child,
vanishing train.
"That's quite true, upon my honor. Honest Indian." I could not but smile, at which he grimaced. "I gave myself away that time," he said. "But do you know that, although I've kept the diary for months past, it never once struck me how I was going to find any particular part of it in case I wanted to look it up? By this time my mind must have something to add to the sum of our knowledge. By this time my mind was made up that the diary of a doctor who attended Lucy
Good
might
evening,
have something to add to the sum
signore.
of our knowledge of the terrible
buonanotte,
deed.
signore
And I
Knight.
said boldly, "Then, Dr. Seward, you had better let me copy it out for
Evening,
you
Wilkes.
on my typewriter." He
You
grew to a
still looking for
positively
something to
deathly
do?
pallor as
Oh,
he said,
I'm still looking.
No,
How's
no,
the food?
no.
That
For all the
French.
world, I
I'd rather
wouldn't
have
let you
snakes
know
and
that
stuffing
terrible
myself.
story.
Ah, that does
Then it
sound
was
delightful.
terrible. My intuition
I'll,
was right.
I'll
For a moment, I
just be
thought,
over here.
and as my eyes ranged the room, unconsciously looking for something or some opportunity to aid me, they lit on a great batch of typewriting on
Yeah,
the table.
I could ask
His
him.
eyes caught the
But I'd
look in
rather get
mine,
him
and without
alone.
his thinking, followed their direction. As they saw the parcel, he realized my meaning. "You do not know me," I said. "When you have read those papers, my own diary, and my husband's also, which I have typed, you will know me better. I have not faltered in giving every thought of my own heart in this cause, but
There
of
they
course
go.
you do not know me yet, and I must not expect you to trust me so far." He is certainly a man of noble nature. Poor dear Lucy was right about him. He stood up and opened a large drawer in which were arranged in order a number of hollow cylinders of metal covered with dark wax, and said, "You are quite right. I did not trust you because I did not know you, but I know you now, and let me say that I should have known you long ago. I know that Lucy told you of me. She told me of you too. May I make the only atonement in my power? Take the cylinders and hear them. The first half-dozen of them are personal to me, and they will horrify you. Then you will know me better. Dinner will by then be ready. In the meantime, I shall read over some of these documents and shall be better able to understand certain things." He carried the phonograph himself up to my sitting room and adjusted it for me. "Now I shall learn something pleasant, I am sure, for it will tell me the other side of a true love episode of which I know one side already." Dr. Seward's Diary, 29 September. I was so absorbed in that wonderful diary of Jonathan Harker and that other of his wife that I let the time run on without thinking. Mrs. Harker was not down when the maid came to announce dinner, so I said,
Who
"She
are
is
you?
possibly
Hold her.
tired. Let dinner wait an hour," and I went on with my work. I had just finished Mrs. Harker's diary when she came in.
God help ya.
She looked sweetly pretty, but very sad, and
Where's
her
the
eyes
baby?
were flushed with crying.
Don't know
This
what
somehow
you...
moved me much.
The
Of
baby.
late, I have
Prince
had cause
James's
for tears,
baby.
God knows.
If you've
But the relief
harmed
of them
him,
was denied me.
don't
And
know
now
what
the
you
sight
are
of those
talking
sweet
about.
eyes,
Last
brightened
night,
with
Prince
recent
James of
tears,
Albany's
went
son
straight
and
to my
only
heart.
heir was
So I
taken
said
from
as
his
gently
house.
as I could, "I greatly fear I have
We
distressed you."
had anything to do with it.
"Oh
That's
no,
preposterous.
not distressed me," she replied. "But I have been
Is
more
it
touched
now?
than I can say
Then
by
why
your
were the
grief.
kidnappers
That
followed
is
to
a wonderful
Cahuiza?
machine,
Cahuiza?
but it is
On the
certain,
train?
but it is cruelly true. It told
I
me
have no
in its very
idea.
tones
I
the
swear
anguish
to
of
you,
your heart.
the order
It
had
was like a
nothing
soul
to do
crying
with
out
it.
to Almighty
Perhaps
God.
you were not
No one must
informed.
hear them spoken
No.
ever again.
Well,
See, I have tried to
why
be
would
useful.
they bring
I've
the
copied out
infant
the
here
words
then?
on my typewriter,
If they
and
were
none
going
other
to do
need now
something
hear
so
your heartbeat.
so
as
outrageous,
I did.
I assure you, they would not
No one
bring
need
him
ever
to
know,
Rennes-le-Château.
shall ever know,
You are
I
mistaken,
said in a low
sir.
voice.
We find
She
the
laid her
baby
hand on mine and
unharmed,
said very
or all
gravely,
negotiations
"Ah,
cease
but they
immediately.
must."
But one
Must?
thing has nothing
But
to do
why?
with the other.
I asked.
Surely Prince
Because
James
it is a
has
part of the
other.
terrible
We'll be
story,
back tomorrow.
a part of
You
poor dear
better have an
Lucy's
answer,
death
I know.
and all that led to it. Because in the struggle which we have before us to rid the earth of this terrible monster, we must have all the knowledge and all the help which we can get. I think that the cylinders which you gave me contained more than you intended me to know, but I can see that there are in your record many lights to this dark mystery. You will let me help, will you not? I know all up to a certain point, and I see already, though your diary only took me to 7 September, how poor Lucy was beset, and how her terrible doom was being wrought out. Jonathan and I have been working day and night since Professor Van Helsing saw us. He has gone to Whitby to get more information, and he will be here tomorrow to help us. We need have no secrets amongst us. Working together and with absolute trust, we can surely be stronger than if some of us were in the dark. She looked at me so appealingly, and at the same time manifested such courage and resolution in her bearing that I gave in at once to her wishes. You shall, I said. Do as you like in the matter. God forgive me if I do wrong. There are terrible things yet to learn of, but if you have so far traveled on the road to poor Lucy's death, you will not be content, I know, to remain in the dark. Nay, the end, the very end, may give you a gleam of peace. Come, there is dinner. We must keep one another strong for what is before us. We have a cruel and dreadful task. When you have eaten, you shall learn the rest, and I shall answer any questions you ask. If there be anything which you do not understand, though it was apparent to us who were present. Mina Harker's Journal, 29 September. After dinner, I came with Dr. Seward to his study. He brought back the phonograph from my room, and I took my typewriter. He placed me in a comfortable chair and arranged the phonograph so that I could touch it without getting up, and showed me how to stop it in case I should want to pause. Then he very thoughtfully took a chair with his back to me so that I might be as free as possible, and began to read. I put the forked metal to my ears and listened. When the terrible story of Lucy's death and all that followed was done, I lay back in my chair, powerless. Fortunately, I am not of a fainting disposition. When Dr. Seward saw me, he jumped up with a horrified exclamation and hurriedly taking a case bottle from a cupboard, gave me some brandy, which in a few minutes somewhat restored me. My brain was all in a whirl, and only that there came through all the multitude of horrors the holy ray of light that my dear, dear Lucy was at last at peace. I do not think I could have borne it without making a scene. It is all so wild and mysterious and strange that if I had not known Jonathan's experience in Transylvania, I could not have believed. As it was, I didn't know what to believe, and so got out of my difficulty by attending to something else. I took the cover off my typewriter and said to Dr. Seward, "Let me write this all out now. We must be ready for Dr. Van Helsing when he comes. I have sent a telegram to Jonathan to come on here when he arrives in London from Whitby. In this matter, dates are everything, and I think that if we get all our material ready and have every item put in chronological order, we shall have done much. You tell me that Lord Godalming and Mr. Morris are coming too. Let us be able to tell him when they come." He accordingly set the phonograph at a slow pace, and I began to typewrite from the beginning of the 7th cylinder. I used manifolds, and so took 3 copies of the diary, just as I had done with all the rest. It was late when I got through, but Dr. Seward went about his work of going his round of patients. When he had finished, he came back and sat near me, reading, so that I did not feel too lonely whilst I worked. How good and thoughtful he is. The world seems full of good men, even if there are monsters in it. Before I left him, I remembered what Jonathan put in his diary of the professor's perturbation at reading something in an evening paper at the station at Exeter. So, seeing that Dr. Seward keeps his newspapers, I borrowed the files of the Westminster Gazette and the Pall Mall Gazette and took them to my room. I remember how much the Daily Graph and the Whitby Gazette, of which I had made cuttings, helped me to understand the terrible events at Whitby when Count Dracula landed. So I shall look through the evening papers since then, and perhaps I shall get some new light. I am not sleepy, and the work will help to keep me quiet.
Yes?
Dr. Seward's Diary, 30 September. Mr. Harker arrived at 9 o'clock. He had got his wife's wire just before starting. He is uncommonly clever, if one can judge from his face, and full of energy. If this journal be true, and judging by one's own wonderful experiences, it must be, he is also a man of great nerve. That going down to the vault the second time was a remarkable piece of daring. After reading his account of it, I was prepared to meet a good specimen of manhood, but hardly the quiet, business-like gentleman
We don't have a choice.
Later, after lunch, Harker and his wife went back to their own room, and as I passed a while ago, I heard the click of the typewriter. They are hard at it. Mrs. Harker says that they are knitting together in chronological order every scrap of evidence they have. Harker has got the letters between the guns and signed the boxes of Whitby, and the carriers in London lies. Parker has gone back and began collating material. He says that by dinner time they will be able to show a full
gents,
connected
out on the
narrative.
town
He
tonight.
thinks that in the meantime I should
what
see
town
Zen
there
Theatre,
is?
as hitherto
Gonna join
he has
us,
been
man?
a sort of
Yes,
index to
please
coming
do.
and going
Oh,
of
no,
the town.
thanks. I was
I
just
hardly
driving
see
around.
this yet, but when I get into dates I suppose I shall. But it's good thing that Mrs. Parker put my cylinders into type. Never could have found the dates otherwise. I found Renfield's face happening in his room with his hands folded, smiling benignly. At the moment, he seemed as sane as anyone I ever saw. I sat down and talked to him about a lot of subjects, all of which he did naturally. He said that as I was before, close to subjects never meant to be my knowledge of the field. In fact, he was so confident in his I believe that, had I not had to chat with Parker and read the letters he had written, I never would have cared to try and look at knowledge of the This all seems confirmation of our idea. However, after a while I came away. My friend is just a little too sane at present to make it safe to probe him too deep
I've already
with
got
questions.
that license plate
He might
number.
begin to think, and then